When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Over to you, Debbie, I believe.
Thank you. Councillor McCullum.
Present.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Present.
Councillor Hall.
Present.
Cindy Collier.
Present.
Christine Morrison.
Present.
Peter Sullivan.
Present.
Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Right. I can confirm we're today. I'm moving on to agenda 1, public speaking. I believe there are no members registered to speak. Okay. Agenda 2, appointment of vice chairman. So I ask, obviously, from the committee nominees to be appointed to vice chair. Any nominees? Any nominees?
Chairman, Ian Hall. I'd like to propose our last chairman and a very, very helpful chairman, Peter Sullivan.
Thank you, Ian. Have we got a seconder? Anyone like to second?
Second.
Okay, Christine, second. Okay, so all those in favour, please raise your hand. Favour? Sorry, I can't see. 1, 2, 3.
Councillor Cullen, would you like me to do it by roll call?
Yes, please. That would be easier. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So, Councillor McCollum, are you in favour?
In favour,
Yeah.
sorry.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support.
Councillor Hall.
Support.
Cindy Collier.
Support.
Christine Morrison.
Support.
Peter Sullivan. Sorry, Peter, you're on mute.
Support.
So that was unanimous to agree Peter Sullivan as vice chairman.
Thank you very much and welcome aboard again, Peter. Here we go again. Okay.
Thank you, Tony.
Agenda number 3, minutes of previous meeting. If anyone has a comment on the set of meetings from 23rd of January 2020, please do so by raising your blue hand. If no blue hands are raised, I will take it that this is an indication that you all agree the minutes from the previous meeting. So any blue hands?
No, no blue hands.
Blue hands. So I accept that the minutes are therefore agreed. Item number 4, apologies. Alethea.
Okay, so I've got apologies from Councillor Helen Parr, Councillor Brenda Taylor, Christine Drew and Kat Summers.
Okay, thank you for that. And item 5, declaration of interest. Debbie, do you want to do a call?
Yep, I'll do roll call. So, Councillor McCullum.
None.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, I have a declaration of interest. I work for Exeter City Council in the Assets Department as a surveyor on compliance.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you. Declaration of interest. My mother is a tenant and uses Safeguard, and if it comes up, Devon County Councillor.
Thank you. Cindy Collier.
Yes, declaration of interest. I'm a tenant of East Devon District Council.
Thank you. Christine Morrison.
Declaration. I'm a tenant.
Thank you, Christine. And finally, Peter Sullivan.
Declaration of interest, tenant of East Devon.
Thank you. That's the end of the declarations.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, item number 6, matters of urgency. I don't believe there is any. Nope. Okay, we'll move on. Item 7, confidential or exempt items. There are no confidential exempt items which the officers have recommended should be dealt with in this way. So before I move on to matters of discussion, I'd like to introduce a new officer to us, which is Joe. Is it Garfoot? Sorry, Joe. Joe is taking over temporarily from Amy, who obviously is going on maternity leave. So Joe is going to take on the reins while she's away. So welcome to Joe. Joe, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
I can do a brief, yes, absolutely. I live locally. I live in Topsham, so nice, easy commute for me. I've been here, this is my 2nd week. I've received a very warm welcome, so that's fantastic. Amy is leaving a really tight ship behind. She's done a fabulous job. So she has a great team. So I'm really looking forward to covering her post while she's off having her bab. For my professional history, I've spent 18 years working for a large national housing association. We were an RP, also a charity of a social enterprise. I left that organisation as Director of Housing for the Southwest area. And prior to that, I was a social worker and I worked for Devon Social Services, Buckinghamshire Social Services and Bedfordshire Local Services. So wide-ranging experience, but really, really looking forward to my time with East Devon District Council. So thank you. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Joe. Right, moving on, matters for discussion. Item number 8, forward plan, which I believe Amy is doing the presentation. Amy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you. So very briefly then for this, obviously following the cancellation of our March meeting and not having had one since because of circumstances that have hit, we've had to do a bit of reorganising, but today we present many of the topics that we were due to bring forward in March with changes to reports to reflect where we are now, obviously in some of those areas. There's already some topics lining up for November, so I've already started to populate the forward plan, as members will see. And as always, this is your opportunity, members, to bring any topics forward that you want us to bring back to you. So happy to take any suggestions or requests.
Thank you, Amy. I'd like to, obviously, to invite any non-members to speak, please, by raising the blue hand. I see
We have
Dan's.
Councillor Ledger.
Okay. Over to you, Councillor Ledger.
Thank you, Chair. It's just 2 quick ones. So there's nothing on the forward plan for the recently announced £1 billion to support decarbonisation of public buildings and social housing. I think that's something that should be key to the Housing Review Board, and you should be at least getting a report on it sometime soon. And also the £12 billion funding from the government on the affordable housing programme. That's a 5-year programme that starts next year. And I think it'd be fantastic if another report could come to HRB for that as well.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Amy, you take care of that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, Dan. So we'll add them to the forward plan for November. We're going to touch on some of those areas, particularly with the decarbonisation and the climate change report today. And we've got, I think, a right to buy spend report that we're suggesting comes forward in November, which sort of links to that second issue. But yeah, absolutely, we can take those forward.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, I'd like to invite the members of the committee. Anyone who wants to speak, please raise your blue hand.
Councillor Hall has raised his blue hand.
Okay, Councillor Hall, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. On the forward plan, Chairman, I think it may be very timely to actually bring up the biggest piece of housing land which the East Devon District Council owns, which is over my right shoulder by 100 metres or so at First Avenue on the back end of Millway Rise. This is an opportunity for East Devon District Council, as we do own the land, to do a scoping paper to see what we can do to benefit the Axminster community and that of the wider East Devon area. This piece of housing land has been within East Devon's ownership for many, many years. There's been a huge amount of frustration and a little bit of people being a bit perplexed why this area has not been developed. I personally feel this is an opportunity to possibly add to our own housing stock, or it could be housing association, but whatever it is, being affordable for the people who live in East Devon. I've seen it being kicked in the long grass for many years, and I feel this is an opportunity for this committee to possibly drive it forward. And I do notice, Chairman, that our asset portfolio holder is here today, and he also lives in Axminster, and I'm sure he would be more than through you, Chairman, be more than happy to possibly give his support on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Anybody want to respond? Amy or anybody?
Please, Chair.
Yeah, sorry. Who's oh, Councillor Hayward. Carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, in response, I emailed Councillor Hall, Councillor Moulding, Councillor Jackson recently about this, because yes, it does fall under asset. It's an asset of East Devon, and yes, I agree. I think housing on the site, you know, we have an aspiration to deliver social housing, affordable housing. We're not seeing enough of it. Developers are reneging at every opportunity on their affordable obligations. So yes, it's a wonderful piece of land, ideally suited. It's got good access, and I know it's long been an aspiration of Ian to see this develop for social good. So yes, I applaud that. The response I got back from Councillor Moulding, and I don't think he's here at the moment, is that he's been, you know, discussing this with Mark Williams, our CEO, and that he would want Mark Williams present. Personally, I can't understand that, because this is, you know, it's not a huge project, and Mark isn't involved in every single asset discussion. Certainly a discussion between Tim Childs, the Asset and Estates SMT lead, and myself and the 3 ward members, and of course Councillor Ledger, Councillor Megan Armstrong, because it's a joint project. And thank you, Councillor Ledger. Well, we scoped at the housing TAF, so the housing TAF is happening, and it is a great opportunity. So I wouldn't really want at this stage to sort of muddy the water. It's been put to me. It's the first opportunity we've had, the housing TAF, and I was talking to Tim Childs only this morning about how we make the most of our assets. Which ones do we sweat? Which assets perhaps have to be revived? We have a commercial investment framework. If the appetite isn't to invest in external assets, it might be that the council's appetite is to invest in renewing and improving and better utilising our own assets, and this could be one of them. You know, we own land in the middle of Millway Estate. We own lots of garages. You know, there needs to be a new way of thinking, and I thank you, Councillor Hall, for bringing it up. I've only been a member of this authority for a year and a half, or little under a year and a half. Councillor Hall's been a member of this authority for 5.5 years. Councillor Moulding for 30 years. So, you know, we've all got to play a part in this, but it's new to me, so I'm taking it forward, you know, in my role of portfolio holder for assets. So thank you very much indeed. Through you, Mr. Chair, it's on my agenda. Councillor Ledger's aware of it, Councillor Armstrong's aware of it, and the 3 Axminster ward members will be invited to put their views for their the residents of Axminster and the Greater East Devon area. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. And just from my own point of view, I totally agree with you. We've had this conversation the last 12 months with various people. We have got assets. We should be using them to do right for our East Devon, basically. But anyway, carrying on. Anyone else on this one? Yeah,
Councillor Hall?
Yeah, Councillor Hall. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you again, Chairman, and thank you for Councillor Hayward's comments. I just felt I was duty bound to actually put it on the forward plan. So hopefully, between all the portfolio holders and therefore the council, we can get some meat on the bones that we can actually move forward. Thank you very much for giving me the time to speak again.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Next.
Peter Sullivan.
Over to you, Peter. Do you want to unmute?
Okay, thank you, Tony. Sorry, thank you, Chair.
All right.
Formal. Just to say that a couple of years ago, the tenants went on a tour of quite a few areas within East Devon. And I've got to say that the garages in Axminster, I think there was some people had never been there before, and they were quite shocked at how much space there was available there and in the rest of the Axminster area that hadn't been used in the past. So from the tenant side, we, you know, at this time, we'd like to support this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Nobody else?
Nobody else, no.
Okay, thank you, Emily, for your presentation. Moving on. Sorry, keep myself organised here again. Sorry, I've lost track now. Item 9. Update on integrated asset management contract. And obviously at this stage, I'd like to welcome Kate Breed from Ian Williams Limited to the meeting. And I believe Kerry Spindle is doing the presentation. Kerry?
Thank you, Chair. I am. Hello.
Okay, over to you.
Thank you. My name is Kerry Spittle, and I've taken the role of contract manager since the 20th of July. And as the report sets out, the last 6 months have been anything but business as usual. So hard to pick up on exactly where we left off when we reported to you in January. The partnership has now had its 1-year anniversary, and we are continuing to take steps towards normality and full recovery, is right to point out that through the crisis of the pandemic, we have been reassured by the continuity of the service we have received from Ian Williams. Both us and Ian Williams have had to deal with an array of issues that we could not have prepared for, but good early business continuity, planning and daily communication, daily communication has placed us in a strong position throughout. We are so proud of what we have been achieved, and we reflected this through a press release a few weeks ago to celebrate some of this success openly. As soon as lockdown was imposed, our managers within the property and asset team worked closely with Ian Williams to change the way of working. Specifically the services that could be delivered, it was very quickly decided that we would continue to provide emergency cover repairs and urgent repairs that, if not carried out adversely, affect the fabric of the property or present a health and safety compliance risk. As well as providing the above cover, we also managed to continue delivering voids based on a much reduced level. Communication through this period was excellent, with daily update calls between EDDC and Ian Williams in order to ensure constant contact and an understanding of pressures and challenges that both organisations were facing. The void side of the service has still yet to return to normal, and as set out in the contract, as at present health and safety restrictions prevent the pre-inspection process being carried out while the property remains occupied. As the board will be aware, we are experiencing some operational challenges back at the beginning of the year as we continue to settle in our new ways of working. This was not helped with some difficulties we had with recruiting, and for some time we've been keen to ensure we are stabilising the team with ensuring we have the right people in the right positions. We are making some good progress here, particularly with management positions, but recruitment for surveyors is still in progress. We are continually reviewing the labour structure with Ian Williams to ensure the skill set is in place and the requirements of the contract can be delivered. In addition, Ian Williams have created a Customer Liaison Officer role to work closely with EDDC's Business Development and Customer Improvement Manager to manage complaints and tenant issue queries related to repairs and voids. We are jointly taking a lessons learned approach to complaints we received through the first few months of the contract, in order to understand how and why these arose and what needs to be done to prevent such complaints happening again. We are aware of the significant importance of handy-person service to our tenants, and although we are aware this work is being covered by other operatives, we have advised unions that this role must be reinstated as required by the contract. Coupled with this, EDDC will also be carrying out a review and rebranding advertising of the service. To summarise, the first year of the IAMC contract threw up many challenges, not just for those related to COVID, but also understanding the new delivery model for reactive repairs, voids, the new working practices that need to be followed, establishment of new working relationships, and a number of personal challenges and changes. We have now entered the second year of the contract. As part of the milestone, our external consultants, Echelon, have been commissioned to carry out an annual review that's set out in the terms of the contract. We are looking forward to the results of this review. Over the past couple of months, and particularly since EDDC has engaged a permanent contracts manager, there seems to be a more harmonious working relationship between all parties, so much so that everyone is excited to see how the contract develops over the second year of this long-term relationship. Intense focus will remain on driving forward KPI improvements as we continue to work on managing performance, but there will also be considerable focus on driving forward all other areas. I'm pleased to welcome Kate Green to the meeting. Kate is General Manager at Ian Williams and looks after our contract. At the request of the Chair back in January, Kate is pleased to be in attendance today to answer any questions, but she will start with a brief introduction. Over to you, Kate.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, everybody, for inviting us here today. Just to give you a bit of background about myself, I am the General Manager for Ian Williams. I've worked within the company for about 17 years. For the last 10 of those, I've been working strictly in response and asset maintenance. And the last 4, I've been operating a General Manager role, which basically means I cover a couple of businesses who undertake this work. So I'm familiar with the response maintenance side, I'm familiar with voids, and I'm familiar with the asset service. With me today actually is a gentleman called Aaron Kelly, who is the business manager employed to run the offices for East Devon District Council. So he is the main operational man who is organising this contract for all of us. So he may well chip in with any questions a little bit later. But just to give you a very brief overview, and I know Kerry's done a brilliant job there, but as I've not met anybody before, we obviously mobilised last year in July, strong mobilisation, got off the ground running, and we worked to the basis of having an anticipated number of jobs. We were hit with a little bit of a higher workload than we anticipated coming up to Christmas, and the winter period didn't help because it was quite terrible weather conditions. Our void service has been, I would say, difficult the first half of the contract. The voids are a lot bigger than I think we originally anticipated, so there's a lot more work that's being done within those properties. So I think the service generally, as you probably are all aware from your last meeting, which I wasn't at, took a little bit of a dip in the December-January period. But as pointed out in the paper, we had a number of meetings when I came back from maternity with Amy and with John to kind of take stock of where we were, realise what the issues were in both sides, where we had things to improve and streamline and generally get better. And since then, we've put in place an action plan. We've been working on those key target areas to improve the service. That was showing fruition throughout March. Unfortunately, then we all got hit with a pandemic, which didn't particularly help the situation and had to scale back service considerably. But for East Devon, we kept going a number of our operatives, a large number of operatives and a large number of our supervisory and office staff in order to make sure that we maintained a service throughout that period of time. So throughout the COVID core months, which were April and May, when most of our the rest of our business was closed, we undertook in the region of about 1,000 repairs in response maintenance, which were emergencies and urgents, and about 40 voids, scaled down because obviously due to the social distancing and the situation at the time, we could only have one person working in the property at a given time. But we endeavoured to provide as much of a service as we possibly could to keep things going and to keep the tenants safe and secure in their properties. I would say that throughout the pandemic, although it has been a very difficult situation for everybody concerned, what it has done for our partnership on this contract has brought us considerably closer together, because we have actually had the opportunity, we've been having the daily meetings, the daily dialogue, really sort of nailing the plans for going forward, how we communicate, what the next stages are. So we've worked incredibly closely with EDDC, and I think that throughout the whole thing, it's really brought us closer together. We're now back to full steam in terms of our staffing structure and have been since June. We've dealt with the majority of the backlog of repairs that were recorded throughout that period. So we're moving forward with those. And although the voids is not quite back to full steam on the basis of its pre-inspections, work is going ahead. So that's going great guns at the moment. So I think generally, in summary, we had a dip at the beginning of the year, but we had already made plans to come through that and make it better. We've had the COVID situation, which I think between the both of us, we've dealt with incredibly well. And we're actually in a really good position at the moment in moving it forward. We both know, both parties are recognising that there are, now it is all about refining this service, changing some of the process, tweaking things here and there to make it absolutely fit for purpose. But we're all really confident that we are going to be able to deliver a fantastic service going forward.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Okay, obviously hands out to the non-members. Anyone wishing to speak, blue hands, please. Debbie, who's doing the blue hand check for me? Okay, we've got Paul Miller, I believe, who wishes to speak. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. At the last meeting of this committee, which took place obviously before lockdown, I was very concerned about a report about the new repairs service, and those concerns were underlined after being approached in my role as the council's designated person for social tenants, a case which is likely to be referred to the Housing Ombudsman related to disrepair. So it's greatly encouraging to see that the relationship between the council and Ian Williams Limited is improving. However, the fact there is no dedicated handy person is for me a serious cause for concern. It is mentioned in the report that this cannot continue in the long term. And my question is, what is the expectation on both sides in terms of a timetable for the contractor to ensure that there is a new dedicated handy person in post? Because making sure a handy person is in place soon will surely reduce the number of complaints. And as we can see in a report later in the agenda, complaints about untimely repairs have been increasing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Who wishes to respond? Okay, Kate, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Can I just a little bit of background about the handy person service? We absolutely recognise that it's crucial and that we need to have this in place. Unfortunately, the person who transferred as the handy person to Ian Williams left earlier on in the contract year. And whilst we were recruiting at the time of the pandemic, we had struggled to find somebody that would fit the bill. Now, we recognise we absolutely have to have that person in place. Timeline as of yet has not been established between us and EDDC. However, the reason for that being, at the present moment in time, with the social restrictions that we have on the service we are able to offer, it makes it very difficult for us to have somebody fulfilling that role. Because as I understand it, the role isn't about going into somebody's home and making a quick repair. It is much more the kind of bigger picture. It's being able to spend time with individuals, spend time with tenants, engage with them a bit more, have that real valued contact. And I have a duty of care, obviously, to the tenants and also to our operational teams. And at this present moment in time, to have the way we carry out repairs is we go in, we do what we absolutely need to do to the best of our ability, but the the length of time we're there is reduced as much as it can be on the basis that it's safer for us as an employer and safer for the tenants to do that at this present moment in time. So that obviously does inhibit having a person dedicated to that type of service. The other thing that I would say, and this is tied in with what Kerry mentioned about relaunching it, and this is quite crucial, is that throughout the first year, there were a very limited of repairs that were reported in that service. Now, I think from memory, it was in the region of about 350 repairs, which may sound like quite a lot, but actually it isn't in the scheme of things. To have one or even two people employed in that role, 350 repairs is not enough to sustain one person for probably less than half a year of employment. And obviously we're dedicated to being able to employ people, to have them there in permanent positions. And that role, again, is very niche. You need the right person. And you couldn't bring somebody in on a temporary contract and then let them go again. That's not an easy way to do it. So we haven't established a timescale. We do absolutely recognise it has to be done and implemented. But what we're doing at the moment is looking at the social distancing situation, and also we'll be working with Kerry and her team on rebranding it going forward, because what we want to do is encourage the work to come in. We need those jobs to be able to fulfil that role in earnest. Does that help at all?
Thank you. That very excellent answer. Very encouraging.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Next is
Councillor Ledger.
Councillor Ledger. Over to you.
I'm just looking at the cost analysis under the report, and under voids, obviously we've got some massively high void costs. Within the report, it just states that this will be constantly under review, but it doesn't state any kind of action plan or ways forward on ways to reduce this down to the actual KPI target. What is being implemented by Ian Williams to actually bring this price down? I obviously know with current COVID, it will be hard and there will be additional costs, but moving forward into next year and hopefully into the future when we won't be in the middle of a pandemic, how are we reducing these costs?
Okay, there's a couple of things with that specifically. Firstly, as Kerry alluded to, we've got an annual review coming up, which is being a cost review, which is being undertaken by Echelon. And as part of that, they look at the whole package, how it was tendered, what margins were put forward, that we supply all costs, all data for all of the contracts. So that it's very transparent, it's very open book. So they will see everything, what we charge, what we've got, what profit we've earned, all of those things. So that helps to sort of make those figures tangible and reliable. The other thing I would say is that the voids were tendered based on some historical data that was included with the tender package. Price was put forward. It's supposed to be a price per void. The KPIs are length of time it takes to do the void, and that is based on the price of the property or the expected work within it. Now, the problem we've had, and this is one of the reasons why the service was a bit of a struggle at the beginning of the year, is the voids have always been significantly larger than what was originally anticipated. So the voids at the moment, the cost is high, you're quite right, but it's not unduly high for the work that's being done in those properties. The work that's being done is about double the amount of work that was originally anticipated. So there's two ways of looking at this. What we're doing is we're keeping a check on our costs. We're having the annual review. At the same time, we're looking at doing a full void process review alongside EDDC. So EDDC are taking the reins on it in-house to start that process, to look at it from top to toe, to really understand the voids in earnest and how it works and what is included in the specification and what isn't. Making that probably into a bit of a to package. It may involve some repricing from our side as well to say, okay, so we've changed the void specification because we recognise that in 90% of properties you redecorate all of them, as an example. That's not what happens, but as an example, that wasn't part of the original spec. You are doing that in all of your properties because generally they need it. Shall we include that as part of the spec? If we do, let's look at the pricing structure. Is the price that's in place for the specification of works right? Or is the specification of work and the price something that needs to be adjusted, and alongside that, the length of time we're expected to do a property within? Because if you are measuring a property and you expect it to cost £2,000 and be done in 5 days, but the cost of the work is actually £5,000, to get every void that's £5,000 within those 5 days is a very hard challenge. It's very difficult. So the void is under a constant review, but at the moment it will be part of a significant project to tackle it from all angles. And that will be a joint project going forward. So maybe that's something that we can expand upon, Kerry, when we come to the next review meeting, and kind of give a bit of background on where we've got to with that, if that's helpful.
That would be great. Appreciate that.
Okay. Next.
Chair,
Yes, sorry.
Chair, we have a blue hand up from Aaron Kelly. Would you like him to have to speak before the other non-members?
Yeah, you can do. I'm just conscious we've got some minutes to get through here. But yeah, carry on, Aaron. Sorry.
Hi all, good afternoon. To be honest with you, I just wanted to summarise a little bit more about the void side, but to be honest, Kate's given a really good explanation on where we are regarding costs anyway. So yeah, I've pretty much touched that one off.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Next.
Councillor Gazzard.
Councillor Gazzard, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. First, can I give a declaration of interest? I am a council tenant. I'd like to concur with the comments that Councillor Miller made. I think we need to see the reinstatement of the handyman or handywoman, because my experience of it is that it's been an excellent service, and it can do small things that can be done quicker than bringing in other contractors. I'd like to ask a question on the customer satisfaction page. When Ian Williams was appointed as contractors, and I was at the meeting when they came to introduce themselves, I asked the question of how you will measure customer satisfaction, and I asked whether or not the system that East Devon had used for many years of sending forms to tenants who have had work done would be reintroduced, and I was assured that that would happen. Well, it's not happening. So are you going to introduce that system? Because I think it's no good contractors in some cases showing laptops to elderly people and asking them to quote what they feel about the repairs, because they might feel intimidated. I think by sending a form where you can put a response on is far more accurate. So I'm disappointed that this hasn't happened, and I appreciate that we're all living in extremely difficult times, but I would ask whether this system is going to be reintroduced, please.
Just to comment on it from our side, because this is a bit of a two-phased approach, and as I kind of alluded to earlier, we've got a lot of bits of process that we are kind of working together on and refining as we go. One of them is actually customer care, as it happens. So probably Kerry will want to say something about this in a second maybe, but we do, Ian Williams have a customer survey on their PDA, as you quite rightly pointed out. That doesn't necessarily fit for everybody, and people can feel uncomfortable about doing that, and I totally understand that. It's measured in a bit of a two-phased approach. So we record that data for our own purposes.
Suddenly lost all this.
And
yeah,
East Devon, sorry, I'm not sure.
Right.
Giles, you're not muted.
East Devon District Council send the hard copy customer satisfaction surveys, but I don't know that they have been going out whilst the pandemic was on. I know that I'm aware that that has been reinstated recently, because I've actually seen some data coming back in from those this month. But I also think maybe it's something that they were looking at re-engaging with the tenants on, in terms of the suitability of the questions, what the format should be, that type of thing, and kind of giving it a bit of a revamp. But Kerry, I don't know if you want to discuss it a bit more from your side, because obviously I'm a little bit less knowledgeable on that one.
Hello. Yes, we are. We have introduced we will be introducing the paper format. We have looked at some questions so that we can gauge it more correctly. We also have our hub advisors to give tenants a call and speak to them about their repair and how they feel, and they can answer certain questions on the form, but we do have a paper form as well. So we have looked, and we are introducing that back in. Now that we're going through the pandemic, we can actually introduce that back in. So we've looked at the questions. We did do some, we have done questions, we have asked questions. I've done some myself as well from a post-inspection point of view. So these customer questions will be coming out, and that we are making phone calls for them as well and recording the results.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. Amy, did you want to come in?
I was just going to, yeah, can you hear me, Tony?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to sympathise with Councillor Gazzard on this, because he absolutely has been raising this over a period of time. And I just want to reassure him really that we have been putting pressure on Ian Williams to look at this. I've personally been asking to make sure that our paper surveys are still going out, albeit that can't happen during, or hasn't been able to happen because of infection control during COVID, but we do recognise, and we did quite a big exercise on this through mobilisation, that most of our residents actually very much prefer the traditional way of communicating, which is actually filling out a form, putting it in an envelope and sending it back. And I just want to reassure the board really that we haven't lost sight of that. As Kerry said, we are looking to reinstate it now, but that's backed up with some additional, as Kerry said, telephone surveys, which can be short, sharp surveys done on the day a repair is taken place, generally just after the operatives left, so that we can just gauge a position from the resident at that point as to how they felt about the repair. But just to reassure the board really, Tony, is all I can say, that this is an area that I'm pushing the team on, and it is really important that we get those things in place. So thank you for raising it, Councillor Gazzard, again.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Looking at the list, outside body, Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just to come back on the issue of the handy person. I'm fortunate that I can speak with some authority, given that until 3 years ago, I was a handy person in East Devon. So I'm delighted to see that progress is being made. I suppose my comments would be that Kate referred to that there's sort of 300, 350 jobs pending, and that's about half year's work. I personally see the handy person service as part maintenance and repair, but partly as almost a social service that East Devon and Ian Williams provide in combination. Because speaking from experience, I would go to a client's house to fix a squeaky door or a leaky tap, and you'd find a whole raft of other things that a handyman would naturally see and say, that's going to break soon. That's, you know, could be a safety issue. The resident might not be aware of it, and that's not to generate more work. It's simply something we did, and a lot of clients say, no, it's fine, I won't do it. Fine, you walk away from it. But I think anyone on site could say, you know, even if they say nothing to the tenant, they can report back to their manager, line manager, that this is an issue. And a proactive approach actually preempts significant costs from maintenance down the line, because you can nip it in the bud. So actually a progressive affirmative approach from a handy person saves money in the long run and is a definite boon to the service. And I would absolutely advocate, you know, putting the advert out there, getting someone G'd up. I mean, I'm a clerk to parish councils, as all members here know now, and we're recruiting. We have a handy person in Newton Pobbleford who does all the jobs as the clerk needs. And in my more rural parishes, we're just recruiting a lengthsman, simply to nip jobs in the bud before they become unmanageable, unwieldy, and very expensive. So I would really applaud what Councillor Miller said, but it goes beyond just maintenance. You can actually put tenants at ease. you can save money, and you can do a great social good. So I'm 100% behind that. In terms of keeping them safe, yes, Ian Williams has a duty of care as an employer to the handy person, whoever they are, when they go in. But it wouldn't be too difficult for every time you visit a client, one, to have a little written sheet that you hand to them. You know, yes, I would love a cup of tea every now and again, but if it puts you at risk or me at risk, I'll do without. I have a flask. Please, would it be possible for you, if I'm working in the living room, for you to be in the bedroom or the kitchen? Or even to have a set of packs. I mean, as a handyman, I used to carry all the usual things, gloves, little booties, so I didn't traipse mud through their house. But you could have a little pack with a mask, with gloves, and you pass one to the tenant. The handy person has one as well. Pennies it will cost to provide that, but it provides reassurance and safety for both parties and allows you to carry on, because maintenance and repairs aren't stopping due to COVID. In fact, they're probably increasing because people are in their houses more and they're opening more cupboards, more doors, turning the tap on, flushing the toilet more. So it's only going to get a worse problem, and a worse problem makes more cost down the line. So actually, it's almost self-defeating not to do it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hayward. Back into the committee now. Let's see, we've got Peter, I believe.
Right, thank you, Chair. As chair of the Tenant Repairs Committee, I've written a list down of what we are arranging, and I've arranged this through Sophie Davis, who I know has been in contact with Aaron, and I've been in contact with her throughout this period. And it's literally everything that has been said this afternoon by others. And I think when I look at this list, and I remember back 2 years ago, when we first started the procurement process to find a new contractor, a lot of these items were actually already written into the contract. And I know that there was lots of talks on this, including with Kate Green. I can remember sat there in a meeting with her and Aaron, and a lot seems to have been lost, especially on the customer services social side of the contract. And I know I've got a meeting coming up with Sophie pretty soon, before the end of this month, she's promised. So we will be bringing that up again through the Tenants Repairs Committee. I won't say any more because it's all been said.
Thank you, Peter. Before I move on, can I just obviously remind everyone we've got a long agenda ahead of us, so we do need to move a bit faster, otherwise we won't get through here. So please avoid repeating or a long spiel where you can say it in less words. Councillor Hall. Go on, Councillor Hall.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. And really, to you, through you, Chair, to Kate, we know that there's obviously been a huge bump in the road since you've taken over as the contractor with the pandemic. And I'm not going to repeat everything that's been said, but it seems, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, there was a soft handover. Ian Williams very much knew what it meant to East Devon District Council and the tenants. This care, what we've always provided, that way we've always been a beacon for housing providers other than our own housing stock. What I would like to see is everything what's been asked today at the next board meeting, they are answered because they've been listened to. Because we do not want words, we want our tenants to feel reassured and feel valued. And all these areas, which has been outlined already, need to be really nailed down. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Arnold, obviously I've already come in online, but you know, I'll let you in again.
Oh, I'm really sorry, Chair. Yeah, no, I should have. I tried to put my hand up earlier, but I'm never quite sure what I'm doing, to be honest with you. Still, just a very quick one through you to Amy, if I may. have we seen in the first year the promised savings in the integrated asset management contract? That's the first question. And the second one is, as a percentage, how many of the stated KPIs are they achieving? Thank you, Chair.
Amy, over to you.
So, yes, thank you, Chair. Hi, Councillor Arnott. So we are, as Kate indicated earlier, we are just awaiting any day now the results of our open book financial review. So this is something that we built into the contract. We wanted it to be done by a third party, so it would be better to do it that way. So we have produced all of our finance information. As Kate said, Ian Williams has put all their costs, etc., forward. And we are, I was actually hoping we may have received it by now, but we haven't yet. But that will give us a 12-month in complete review of absolutely everything. As a result of that, we will then be able to publish, obviously, those results, and we'll be in a clearer position to understand where we are. We do know in relation to voids already, although they are higher than the cost that was tendered for, that we are already seeing a saving compared to what we were paying with previous contractors. But we need to go through the motions of looking at that in sort of granular detail and being able to come to some outcomes on that. So I can't answer that question right now, but we will be able to answer that question imminently. And obviously at that point, I suggest that full financial review is then circulated when it comes to fruition. We have included in the report the list of where we are with KPIs. You'll see at the start you'll see that drop that Kate talked about in terms of when we took over, and then we hit the sort of weather over December and January. But you'll see actually, despite COVID, that performance has been pretty good over the last few months. So we've not got August there, but we've got complete up to quarter one. So so things are looking okay. Obviously, as we've already said, we need to keep a constant eye on this. And yeah, that's it.
Okay. Moving on, I don't see any more blue hands. So we'll take it on to the next stage with the recommendations to accept the progress being made since July 2019. Have I got a proposer?
So, Chair, just to come in from a legal point of view, obviously this report is just to be noted. It's a factual report, as various officers and our contractors have contributed to. So it's just to be noted to bring to the attention where the progress that's been made. It just needs to be noted.
Okay, so we just move on. Okay, thank you all very much for that. That was a long one. On to agenda 10, which is disrepair. But again, before I start, or before everyone starts, can you please keep it to a minimum as possible in order for us to progress on. And what have we got? To receive a report from Giles.
Chair,
you, Giles.
Good afternoon, board members and councillors who are listening in. For those who don't know me, I'm Giles Salter. I'm a member of the legal services team. I'm a solicitor. I've looked after housing for probably about 15 years now. And I'm going to talk to you about disrepair from a legal point of view, and from the point of view that for the first sort of 14-15 years that I've been looking after, we never had a disrepair claim. And suddenly from 2018, we started to receive a small trickle of solicitors' letters, obviously instructed by our tenants, who were raising issues of disrepair in their properties. And we went to look at why this was. So what I'm going to do is to talk you through what we've discovered and looked at, and the issues that we've encountered in disrepair claims, to talk to you about some of the procedures and processes and policy that we've put in place, to talk to you about some new legislation that was brought in 2018, but to try and put that into a legal framework to give you some idea of the sort of cases that we have faced in the last 2 years. So I'm going to share my screen. I have about 30 PowerPoint slides. I promise I'm going to try and get this done in 10 minutes. So here we go. So why disrepair? What the definition of disrepair is under Section 11 of the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985. The pre-action protocol that all parties, whether they're acting for the tenant or for local authorities or registered social landlords, have to adhere to in taking disrepair claims to the next level, which is obviously a litigious level and potentially a court proceedings. Defences. These are the defences that we can use to try and mitigate the amount of money and legal costs that we may have to pay out to settle these claims. The issue of access to the property so that we can assess the amount of disrepair that is being alleged in some of these solicitors' letters. How we've gone about trying to avoid these disrepair claims. And as I said, the new legislation that came in 2018, which is the Homes Fitness for Habitation Act 2018, which sort of updates the old legislation from 1985 and sort of tries to put it in a very modern context. So since about, I think, the October 2018, we've had about 14 cases or inquiries about disrepair. We've managed to offset 7 or 8 of them where we've actually gone in and actually sorted out issues before formal litigation has commenced. 2 cases we've actually had to settle and pay some form of compensation and a minimum level of legal costs. And we currently have 1 case which is in the formal litigation process. I can't say too much about that one, but the hope is that the reason why we've chosen to fight that one in the courts is because we think we have a very, very good case to reclaim some of our legal costs and outlays that we've made thus far. So why disrepair now? So 2018 saw the end of the personal injury costs free for all. Fundamentally, what happened was that the legal costs for personal injury were put into a fixed framework. And so lots of legal firms, which tend to be based in the northwest of England, had to look for other forms of work. The other form of work that they lost, of course, was the end of the PPI claims. Further, disrepair came into the public domain because of the tragedy of Grenfell Tower. And as I said already, the new legislation from 2018 focused a number of firms on the potential of new bits of work and new financial flows for making money. So Section 11 of the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985. So this implies an absolute non-excludable obligation upon the landlords, local authorities, private landlords, registered social landlords and housing associations to carry out basic repairs, and they have to keep in repair the properties, the dwelling house, that is the tenanted part of the property, We have to ensure that the installations of the dwelling house, those are the things like the windows, the sewerage, the heating, the electrics are all in working order. And also, of course, the actual four walls themselves and the exterior of the property. I've put together some photographs showing the sort of things that we are coming across, landlords come across in disrepair. Now, you might say, well, is that disrepair? That looks more like compensation potentially from the tenant not running the heating, leading obviously to mold growth. But on the same basis, there is mold there, but that could be caused by structural defects on the outside of the property. So it's a balance of having some form of understanding of what the disrepair cases are in each specific property. And so that's why we try and get a member of the housing surveying team into the properties very early in the process to try and get an understanding of what is being alleged. There's something else, of course, the leak from the toilet, which can or could lead to that disrepair. And of course, the longer these things take to be resolved, the greater the potential of the disrepair and the damage that's going to be done to our property, and the greater the costs to us. One of the things as well is that of course you can see that the damp may have penetrated the electrical system, which of course impinges upon our duty of care, and particularly of course if we have vulnerable people living in our properties, and of course young children. Sometimes we come across this issue, which is condensation or mold growth caused probably by condensation from blown window units. Excuse me. And it's important that we get in to try and work out, as I say, what has caused the mold growth and whether that's an issue that could be litigated. And that's obviously some disrepair in its worst state. There is obviously some cracking on the large cracks on the outside of the property. Now, the important thing to remember is that obviously we have people out, estate management workers, our MSOs and our contractors, and they are our eyes and ears, and they have to ensure that these sort of things are reported early, and so that we get in to actually undertake the works to put the property back in repair. And the final picture is that one. And the question one might need to ask there is, well, that's what the garden looks like. What's the property like inside? So how does EDDC know about disrepair? Well, a good tenant reports disrepair. We also make sure that we have publicity in tenant communications to ensure that tenants know that they should report repair issues very early to us. Obviously through our officers and our contractors, who are, as I said before, our eyes and ears. But finally, of course, is that letter from a solicitor who has contacted us and wants to start the formal litigation process under the pre-action protocol system. So the letter of claim sets out the internal disrepair. It sets out that compensation will be sought. It sets out special damages, and special damages, of course, are the damages done to the tenant's own property, so clothing or electrical items, etc. And of course, the big issue with all of these disrepair claims are the legal costs. As you know, lawyers don't work for nothing. Liability disrepair. So a landlord cannot be liable unless they have been given notice of the defects. So the tenant has to tell us that there is disrepair or that they are reporting issues of disrepair in their property. They can't just rock up and use the pre-action protocol without telling us that there are the issues within their property. And they also obviously have to give us a period of time, which is normally 2 to 3 months, to actually get into the property, assess it, and try and resolve it before they can commence litigation. The other thing is that disrepair doesn't apply to our communal areas in our flats. Those are covered by another piece of legislation, which is Section 4 of the Defective Premises Act 1972. But we have to ensure, of course, that we're taking such care as reasonable circumstances. And so therefore, obviously, it's why we get our estate management officers into our communal areas to ensure that they are free from items that may have been left there, such as old sofas and settees or electrical items, so that tenants can use them for example, escape from fire. So a tenant can't make any, the issues about condensation and mold, which tend to be the first issues that are brought up by tenants. There is a claim for pure condensation if it's due to the tenant's lifestyle. So, for example, we had a case last year where we got into a property very early and found that the tenant was running an unvented tumble dryer with all the doors open. And so, of course, all that heat was passing through the property and causing condensation. Well, that is down to the way in which the tenant is running the tenancy. So there can be no claim for that. However, if there's a structural defect causing condensation, then of course it falls on us as the landlord to resolve that issue as soon as possible. One of the things I've already said is that tenants must use the heating system properly. That is, they've got to run it properly and regularly. We have small electrical items which we place in strategic places within the property to ensure and to monitor that the heating is being correctly used. There's no obligation to install or improve a heating system. And the same applies to insulation and ventilation. So if there is an insulation and ventilation provided, obviously there are in all our properties, I would hope, then we've got no obligation to actually improve that, except by, of course, we do have our regular update programs, and we ensure that all our properties conform to the latest building regulations. So as I said, there is a pre-action protocol for hazardous repair. It's a letter of claim. Normally comes in with an expert's report on the alleged disrepair. What we will do is to, at an early stage, is to get into, as I said before, get into the property to try and look at those allegations and to try and mitigate those allegations or rebut them, so that we can limit the amount of compensation and costs. If that can't be done, then the tenant solicitor will normally issue proceedings through a claim and particulars, and that then of course leads to a contested trial. We will put forward our defence. There is an allocation, a case management conference, where normally both sides would appoint a joint expert to assess the disrepair, and then there'll obviously be a trial and some form of settlement, either by through compensation and or legal costs. One of the things we can do prior to all this is to try and offer a settlement under Part 36 offer, which is that we've assessed the amount of disrepair and we can try and settle out of court. And if the repairs are under £1,000, we can offer a Calder Bank letter, and if the tenant doesn't goes on to litigation and doesn't meet that £1,000 threshold, then of course they don't get their legal costs and they are left with a large legal bill, which is in some ways concerning, of course, because a lot of these firms who are commencing these proceedings are cold calling our tenants and sort of signing them up before, and without the tenants really understanding the complexity of the issues that they may be getting themselves into. One of the things that we may come across as well, of course, is the counter offer in any rent proceedings that we may be taking, and the one of the things we have to be very aware of is that if those are raised by tenants in rent arrears proceedings in court, then we have a very limited time to actually put forward our defence to that counterclaim. But I don't want to get into the complexities of the litigation. I'm moving on. So our defence and mitigation to disrepair is that obviously that the disrepair that is alleged doesn't fall within Section 11, or that no notice has been given by the tenant of any disrepair prior to the claim being started, that we can carry out the repairs, the alleged repairs that are required within a reasonable time. As I said, it's normally up to 3 months, but it depends on the nature of the repair, or that we can evidence that the tenant has caused the problem. I'm going to skip that because I don't think I need to explain that one particularly. So, as I said before, in order to ensure that we can defend repairs, disrepair claims, we ensure that we get into the property within 14 days of the letter of claim, that we carry out our own internal inspection. If we can't get access to do that, then of course we can apply for an injunction to the court to get that access, or for a last resort, bring possession proceedings because the tenant's conduct is unreasonable. The tenants have to allow us access. Of course, what we must do in understanding the disrepair is to know who our tenant is. So we under an obligation in the Equality Act 2010 to understand the protected characteristics of our tenants. Obviously, duty under the Mental Capacity Act 2005. And we need to know whether there are any rent arrears outstanding or whether there have been any other breaches of tenancy. For example, has the tenant entered the roof space, because obviously that's not part of the tenanted property. And quite often, actually, we have found that the property, the roof space has been entered. Things like Christmas decorations put up there, or obviously old boxes, and of course that can cause issues of damp in a property. So it's important to discover whether those voids have been entered. So some of the things we've tried to do in counteracting these disrepair cases is to put in some policies, procedures and processes to ensure that we act quickly. So we've considering stock condition survey every 5 years, and I know that Amy is working on that one. We've made sure that every officer understands that they are a repairs officer. Repairs is very, very important and in the forefront of our officers' thinking. And one of those things is that we've asked that when officers encounter a tenant, we ask if there are issues in the property about repair that we can deal with. So the rent officers, the estates management officers, the MSOs, and our contractors need to ask that question every time they come across a tenant, so that we are put on notice. And as I said, we've spoken with Ian Williams about this. We're trying to ask our contractors and our gas contractors to be our eyes and ears. And they probably have more access into our properties than we do. And it's important that they report any issues they come across, so that we make a record on our system. We make sure we get the feedback. Some of the other things we're doing, obviously, and we've spoken about earlier on in the last report, was monitoring our KPIs, dealing with access issues and liaising with appropriate officers, and gas safety, obviously. We've got injunctions in the past to get gas safety works done, and of course that's put us on notice that there are disrepair issues. Checking our voids, making sure that snagging lists on properties are completed, so that once the tenant goes in there, they then can't be there aren't issues of disrepair. And I've asked the sign-up officers in the allocations team to consider photographs of each property at the sign-up, so we know exactly the condition of the property when the property was handed over, and our mutual exchanges. That there are photographs taken of the boiler lights working, that the window surrounds are clean, and that the ceilings are devoid of mold. There is obviously a difference between the interior and the exterior of the property. The exterior of the property, we are always on notice, because of course our contractors and our officers are always on our estates, so they should be on notice all the time of any issues where there may be an issue of disrepair. The interior of the property, of course, there is the issue of quiet enjoyment, and so we can't enter with unless we have the tenant's permission. Now, quite often, some of these legal solicitors who are we're going up against in disrepair cases tell the tenants that they aren't to let us into the property, but we have a right to enter if we give them notice. If they refuse, then of course we then have to use injunctions. As I said there, we must obtain permission to view allegations. If we don't obtain the permission and just rock up and say we're coming in, that's a breach of the covenant of quiet enjoyment. So we've tried to set up good communication within the service, that the repairs team works with estates management. We're trying to make sure that our repairs records are up to date, and that good notes are made on the system. As I said there, the detail is important, dates and times. And we want to deal with all issues expeditiously. We've asked that we try and get things done within 5 working days and get responses out, and that disrepair takes a priority now within the team. Delay, as I said there, leads to cost. So some do's and do nots. Do not ignore notice or warning letters. If we get a warning letter into the team rather than to legal, that they act on it and they seek legal advice. All dates are diarised. Do not assume there, as I said there, that the defects amount to statutory disrepair. Get someone into the property as soon as possible. Try and carry out works expeditiously so that they resolve the disrepair and abate any statutory nuisance. And if we give advice to the tenant, make sure that it's documented. Make a note. Keeping detailed records. Liaising early with legal and services. Preparing a SCOT schedule. Write out. A SCOT schedule is a useful tool which is used in litigation, where you set out the allegations, you set out you set out the evidence to rebut them, and you set out the evidence that you've done something about them, and you date it all, and then that can be put into the court if the litigation progresses, to show that we have acted reasonably in the circumstances. And one of the things that we have ensured is to make sure that we are very, very clear with the other side that the expert witnesses are incorrect in their assumptions. So we go through those expert witness statements, which we receive with a fine-tooth comb, and that any allegations can be rebutted or that they're inaccurate. So that was the the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985 and our obligations under the pre-action protocol, in 2018 that came along the Homes Fitness for Human Habitation Act, which added on an extra layer of responsibility for landlords. So it's set to the Landlord and Tenant Act a new section 9A, which was another implied covenant, making sure that the property was fit for human habitation from the outset, and that updates and extends the landlord's obligations under section 11 of the Act. And there are a number of salient points that come out of the new section 10 of the Landlord and Tenant Act, which sets out the issues that we now have to be wary of when we are letting a property and throughout the tenancy. Its repair, its stability, whether damp is present, the quality of cavity wall insulation, any issues of condensation, the internal arrangement and occupation and use of the living accommodation. For example, in a number of our houses, we put tenants into downstairs rooms, whether the natural lighting is appropriate. Obviously, we would never let a property without a window in a bedroom, that the ventilation is appropriate, that the water supply is adequate. Some of our properties still have, or at least in the private sector within the region, our district are fed by private water supplies. And that the drainage and sanitary conveniences are up to date and functioning properly. That the facilities for the food prep are updated and disposal of wastewater. And that then brings in the extra layer of the Housing Act 2004, which is the health and safety regs prescribed hazards. So we have to be very wary of those as well when we are dealing with our properties. This extra layer gives the tenant a further cause of action above and beyond section 11, and it takes into consideration any risk to their health or well-being at the start of and throughout the life of the tenancy. This is brand new, as I said, this is brand new legislation. It hasn't been tested in the courts, but you can be sure that there are lawyers out there who will be wanting to test this legislation and use it as an extra layer against our housing management function. So there is a potential floodgate for legal claims from this new legislation on top of section 11. As I said before, there are no current case law for this piece of legislation, but lawyers will want to test it, and we have to assess the risk. And that's why we have put in, over the last year, policy, procedure and process, and the legal services and the housing repairs team are working closely together to ensure that we are protected from lawyers who want to litigate against us. So I think that's really all I want to say, and obviously happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Unfortunately, we had a lot of breakup on your sound during your presentation, so hopefully it hasn't spoiled it for the members, non-members to understand what you were saying. I can't see any hands because obviously you got the presentation. Sorry?
Can you hear me, Chairman?
I can now, yes.
Ah, fabulous. Thank you. Chairman, at the moment you have one blue hand, and that's Councillor Paul Miller.
Yeah, and Paul, please.
I'll try. Through you, Chair. Firstly, a big thank you to Mr. Salter for his very helpful presentation. It'd be great if these slides could be circulated to all councillors, because the Homes Act also applies to private tenants. And as part of my casework recently, I've referred a constituent to a solicitor who is now pursuing her claim. I remember well the Act passing through Parliament. It's a genuinely positive piece of legislation. I think we should welcome it and we shouldn't be afraid of it. I wanted to get some clarity on some vagueness in the report that accompanies the presentation. Paragraph 2.5, where it says 4 of the claims that have been settled currently have been settled currently with reduced offers of compensation. I think it's in the public interest for this committee to know what the actual total costs of the compensation already offered actually amounts to. Paragraph 2.7, our position will be further strengthened when we complete the full stock conditions survey. I wanted to know what's the timeline for this. And finally, the statement that was made about good tenants report disrepair. And I'm sure the council makes it crystal clear that this should be the case, but in the past, there will be tenants who have lived in the private rented sector who have suffered revenge evictions for reporting disrepairs. So arriving in the social housing sector, they can be rather institutionalised within that anxious mindset not to report repairs for fear of upsetting the landlord. And I think this needs to be acknowledged. So I think it's unfair to suggest, albeit by implication, that bad tenants don't report disrepair. But anyway, thank you very much for a fantastic presentation, and I hope I can get some answers to the questions I've asked.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. I will circulate the slides to everyone so that.
Charles, can I just interrupt?
Yep.
I can attach the presentation slides with the minutes, which will go online alongside the agenda next week.
Oh, there we are.
Okay.
Job done.
And in answer to Councillor Miller's other questions, I think those are operational questions for the housing service, and I'm sure that you'll receive answers to those at some point in the future. Hopefully, not too long. I think my colleague Michelle is also online, and she's actually works within the housing repairs team. She's a compliance officer, and she may be able to answer some of those questions for you, actually. Michelle?
Thank you, Giles. Yes, I don't have the figures, and I think Amy might be able to comment on those further with regards to the actual compensation, but that's certainly something that we could get out within the minutes for you. With regards to the stock condition surveys, that is something that we're hoping to get started in the next couple of months. I know it's a project that we've been wanting to do for some time, and we are in the midst of starting that. So we hope that should be started, if not later this year, early part of next year, but certainly within this financial year.
Chair, can I just come in as well on that? Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, hi, Councillor Miller. Yeah, just to confirm, I haven't got the figures obviously to hand right here, but we can absolutely circulate those figures in terms of the compensation paid out. And the second point, with relation to this timescales for the stock condition survey, to be honest, it needed to be done yesterday. So there is a real urgency for us to bring this forward. We will be considering a report a bit later down the agenda, because we're proposing to go out to a framework to get that done as quickly as possible. We need to conclude those discussions with that potential contractor so that we know what that can look like in terms of a time frame. But there is a real urgency for lots of reasons to get the stock condition survey done as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay. I don't see any other blue hands up, so I take it's none from our committee, or from the board, sorry. No. Okay, so as this for information only, we'll move on. So we move on to item 11, which is Advantage Southwest Renewal and Subscription, and I believe that's you again, Amy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So it's a relatively straightforward report. Members will be aware that we have been members of Advantage Southwest for a number of years, and this report basically sets out our recommendation that this should continue for reasons as set out in the report. There are a few different functions to Advantage Southwest. Predominantly, we benefit most through way of procurement, and we take advantage of the many frameworks that we have access to by being a member. Over the past few years, it has seen us access significant financial savings, as set out in section 6 of the report. It's been really encouraging recently, members, to see Advantage Southwest attempting to sort of branch out into other areas. They met with us late last year to discuss some of our current challenges with a view to understanding how they may be able to further support us as a sort of forum. And the next report that's on the agenda is one of those. The huge advantage with this membership is the opportunity that we have to work so closely with other providers. So by coming together this way, we become quite a strong voice in the Southwest for social housing. And as I said, I've been really encouraged to see them trying to diversify into sort of different areas away just from the core stuff that they've done for many years. So in summary, we've made provision for this already in the budget, so it's not any additional spending, but we are looking for your approval today to renew the subscription at a cost of, I believe, £12,000. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, open to non-members. Anybody?
You only have one blue hand at the moment, Chairman, and that is Peter Sullivan.
Okay, Peter, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Just to say that this is a very good system that we're actually involved with this, especially from the tenant side, because every time they get a certain amount of new products, which we may use in our own properties, some tenants actually get invited to a road show with tenants from around the Southwest, and we can discuss these products, and usually on the day we can actually say which products we use and which products we don't. So it's worth every penny, because it's not just about products, it's all the other things that's mentioned. So I'm happy with this service.
Okay, thank you, Peter. No other blue hands, so I take it we put it to the vote to accept this recommendation.
Yes, Chair, it's a straight yes or no.
Yeah. Okay, have I got a proposer?
Can propose it from the chair. Chairman.
Okay, I'll propose it. We got a seconder?
Don't need one if you're the
Oh,
chair.
they will have proposed it. Okay.
Peter's there anyway. Thank you,
Okay,
Peter.
straight to the roll call or whatever.
Okay, so I'll take the vote if you're happy, Chairman.
Yeah,
if you can just say yes or no after I say your name. So, Chairman, we'll start with you. Councillor McCullum.
Yes.
Councillor Chamberlain, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy Collier, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hall, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Christine Morrison. Can't hear you, Christine. Let me unmute you. Are you still with us, Christine?
Yes, I am.
Is that a yes or a no vote, Christine?
Yes.
Thank you, Christine. And finally, Peter Sullivan.
That's a yes.
Thank you. So that's clearly carried, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. So nothing else, we'll move on to the next one, which is item 12. Again, Advantage Southwest, this time recruitment and skills project. And again, Amy.
So yes, thank you, Chair. So as I said, following on from the previous report, this is an actual example of a new initiative coming forward from Advantage Southwest. This has been born out of most members in Advantage Southwest experiencing some difficulties with recruitment and agreement that actually this is an area of risk going forward for the sector if we can't secure the right resources and the right skill set required. So this proposal looks for each member organisation to pay a contribution towards funding an officer who will work across all of the organisations in Advantage Southwest. There is a job description and person specification, I should note that's draft, included as part of the report. So that gives members a bit of a better insight into the role. This is also about doing some work around promoting the housing sector as a career of choice, which, as members will know, is something that I'm personally very passionate about. So you would have picked up in the report some of the initiatives outlined, such as engagement with schools, engagement with colleges, in being able to go out there and promote housing as a career choice. And this very much chimes with some of our content of our current service plan, where we've committed to doing the same, with very much the need to raise the profile around what the work that the housing service do. I should point out that this will only go ahead if enough organisations sign up. So if you approve this today, we would still await a final outcome as to whether this is actually going ahead or not. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Amy. We have Councillor Hall. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like us to move forward with this, and I'd like to propose that we accept this and recommend to Cabinet on this decision. Obviously, it depends on the other councils as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Have we got a second on that? Anyone want to second it? Okay, I'll second it. But,
I think Peter Sullivan seconded it,
oh,
Chairman.
Peter,
You popped
okay,
his blue
Peter.
hand up.
Sorry, your hand's up, Peter. Sorry, I didn't see it. You're muted, Peter. I can't hear you. Okay.
Yes,
so,
I'm seconding that, Tony.
Okay. So we put it to the vote.
So Giles, can you explain what they're voting on before we put the vote, please?
Yeah, yes, I can. So
Thank you.
So the recommendation is to Cabinet that the participation in the initiative at an indicative cost of £3,000 per annum for 3 years.
Thank you. Okay, so when I call out your name, please answer yes if you agree with that recommendation. Councillor McCullum.
Yes.
Councillor Chamberlain, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy Collier, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hall, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Christine Morrison, please. Let me unmute you, Christine. Christine, are you with us?
Yes.
Was that a yes to the vote?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christine. And finally, Peter Sullivan, please.
Yes.
Thank you. That's unanimously carried, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And there's nothing else. So we'll move on to the next item. Item 13, Climate Change Action Plan. And again, Amy.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So members will be aware that just prior to lockdown, our corporate climate change strategy and our action plan was taken through Cabinet and approved. And this report is about understanding the role and challenges that our housing service faces in relation to that. A large percentage of the council's carbon footprint sits within housing, as you'll be aware, so with fuel consumption alone accounting for 38% of the total figure. We know we need to invest heavily in our stock in order to ensure it meets required standards going forward. This is about properties being energy efficient and us taking practical steps away from continuing to install what we have done for many years. So, for example, gas boilers. So this report summarises some of the ways that we intend to translate some of those corporate objectives into actually practically what we're going to do in housing. The report outlines some of what we've already done, which I have to say is pretty small scale in all honesty. So it outlines where we need to start accelerating some of that work and making better progress. It also outlines some of our work in terms of our role as an influencer. So as a landlord to over 4,200 properties, we should be working hard to raise the profile of climate change across our communities. We should be looking at influencing lifestyle choices in any ways that we can. And there's lots of ways, as I say, in terms of the engagement we have with our residents that we can begin doing that. Particularly when it comes to work required to our stock, we've recognised that this is very much a specialist area, and in order to accelerate the work, we need an additional officer who will work within the property and asset team. We will be looking for these pretty specialist skills in relation to energy efficiency, as I've already said. So we've already looked closely at our resources, and due to increasing pressures, particularly in the area of building safety and compliance, the new Building Safety Act, which is coming in next year, is looking to put additional pressure on the service in relation to compliance. So we have had to look at resources very carefully. We do not believe we've got the capacity in the team to drive this at the level it needs to be driven, hence why the recommendation is suggesting an additional officer. So in summary, as I'm sure you'd agree, this report contains arguably some of our biggest challenges ahead. We are absolutely up for it, and on the basis that And on this basis, members are asked to consider the recommendations put forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Amy. Right, I don't see no blue hands go up. Anybody? No. Okay, so move on to Charles, I believe, to
Right, so the
proposal.
Thank you, Chair. So the recommendation is that 1.1
Can I
members
stop you there, Giles? We need
Sorry.
a proposer first, please. Thank you, Chairman.
My apologies. Okay.
It looks like Peter Sullivan has his hand up to do so.
Okay. Seconder?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah.
We got a seconder? Okay, I'll second it. Over to Charles.
Right, so the recommendations in 3 parts. 1.1, that members agree to the climate strategy actions detailed in this report. 1.2, that members endorse the cultural shift required to move to a carbon neutral housing service within 20 years. And 1.3, approval is given for the need for an additional programme works officer who will focus on energy efficiency measures and drive forward the programme for improvements to the housing stock, and to recommend additional funding is designated from the housing revenue account, and this request is made to council.
Okay, we take these as block or as
Take them,
individuals?
you can take them as block.
We'll have difficulty identifying if it's block, and I'm sure that it won't take us long to do 6 names, so I'll go very quickly. Councillor
Chairman,
Cullen.
may I ask a question before we go to vote?
Sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, with this, I've got no issues at all with the recommendations, but just bear with me while I get the actual paper up again. Okay, I'm on there. So when it actually says the recommendations of improving stock, do we need a slight amendment in there for new builds as well? So that we're not just repairing stock. If we are lucky enough to get some new housing stock going forward, that needs to be factored in? Or is that something what needs to be decided at a later date? I'll be happy for guidance, please.
Can I answer that one, Chair? Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Councillor Hall. I would suggest it's something separate. I would suggest that this is about our current stock, and it's about retrofitting and making sure that that's as energy efficient as it can be. I would say that when we are going ahead with any sort of new build scheme, we would be building into the contract very clearly very high levels of energy efficiency standards that we would expect to be met for that. So I would suggest it is not amended and it's dealt with separately.
Chairman, I'm satisfied. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, where were we?
So I think the DSO wanted to take each recommendation as separately. So we'll need to go through each recommendation.
No, if I can clarify, sorry to interrupt both of you. I thought you were referring to on block as the whole board, but obviously to be completely transparent, I'll have to go through the board members. If you're happy for all the board members to take those 3 recommendations, 1 to 3, with a yes, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. It's just important that I ask each member for their yes or no option. So are you happy for me to proceed, Chairman?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor McCullum.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain, please.
Agree.
Thank you. Cindy Collier, please.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Hall, please.
Agree.
Thank you. Christine Morrison, please. Can you unmute yourself, Christine? Are you with us, Christine? Christine, can you give me your vote? Yes or no? I can hear you now, Christine.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you very much, Christine. And
Sorry about
finally,
that.
Peter Sullivan, please. That's okay.
I've got a sticky mouth.
That's fine. Don't worry. It's your first Zoom meeting. Peter Sullivan, please.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So that is carried, Chairman, for those 3 recommendations on that agenda item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So do I need to put it to the vote, or is it all agreed?
That's agreed, Chairman.
Right.
The board has voted on those 3, so you can move to your next item.
Here's the next item. Okay, thank you. And next item is number 14, which is the air source heat pumps. And again, who we got? We have to carry on this one. Over
Sorry,
here,
Chair,
Kerry.
it's actually, sorry, Chair, it's actually Michelle Davidson, the compliance surveyor.
Michelle, sorry, Michelle. Carry on.
Apologies. So I'm going to present this to yourself.
Okay.
So this report sets out our proposal to approve and continue the use of air source heat pumps. As we just touched on, the forthcoming stock condition survey will confirm our reliance on fossil fuel heating systems within our council homes. And using this data, we'll be able to formulate and deliver programs of heating replacement and associated energy efficiency measures designed to reduce our carbon footprint consistent with our council's ambition. Amy's obviously talked on the green agenda and the proposals would see an end to boilers, radiators and cooking hobs in new homes. There's also a similar pressure to decarbonise existing homes, which is for us a significant part of the council's carbon footprint. In 2017, we undertook a scheme at Rodney Close in Exmouth, where we provided our tenants with air source heat pumps. We've had some really good feedback from tenants living in these properties, and we're currently in the process of undertaking further consultation across the whole scheme to gain feedback on areas such as operating the heating system. Our annual boiler replacement programme is currently around 500,000, and we're proposing we set aside £150,000 of this to initiate a programme of mainstreaming the installation of air source heat pumps in our stock. We have also applied for external funding, and we've recently applied for the Green Homes Grant, which is a government initiative that has set aside £50 million to encourage retrofitting of existing properties, both in the social housing sector and private sector. We have based our bidding on the delivery of the Rodney Close project and have proposed that we use the funding to install air source heat pumps in properties that have been identified with a low EPC rating, and we hope to have this outcome of the bid at the end of September. That's it from me. If there are any questions at all.
Thank you, Michelle. Any blue hands? Nope. Not that I see. No. Okay. So obviously this is to note content. Do we need to proceed anywhere else or no?
Chairman, there is a recommendation there to approve the continued use and installation of air source heat pumps.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So I don't know if you want to have a proposer and seconder on the recommendation that's in the report.
Okay, well.
Looks like Peter's there for you again.
Yeah.
Yeah, happy to propose.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you. And so we put it to the vote.
So Giles, if you'd like to read out what
Giles,
the
sorry.
board are voting on, please.
Keep forgetting that bit.
Don't worry.
Giles around.
Would you like me to do it, Giles? Chairman, I'll read it out for you. There must be a technical issue there.
To note, sorry,
So,
I'm back.
Thank you.
So the recommendation is to note the content of the report and to approve the continued use and installation of air source heat pumps as a viable carbon efficient alternative to conventional boilers.
Okay, so if you'd respond yes or no, please, when I call out your name. Councillor McCollum, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain?
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy Collier, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hall?
Yes.
Thank you. Christine Morrison, please. Can you unmute yourself? Thank you, Christine. And finally, Peter Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously, Chairman. Thank you. You
Okay.
can move on to your next item.
Okay, moving on to item 15, which is regular review of neighbourhood and community standards self-assessment. And it's Sue, I believe.
Hello. Yes.
Yes.
This is me. Thank you. Yes. So this report was part of a series of reports that Amy had been bringing to the board on compliance to make sure that we're meeting all regulatory standards across the service. So it was something that would have come to the meeting that was then cancelled or postponed due to COVID. So the purpose is to undertake a self-assessment of current service delivery against the neighbourhood and community standard. And the recommendation was to note the contents of the self-assessment document as set out within the report. So I'll only take you briefly through it, but the standard sets out the minimal requirements. So it's a minimum only for what must be achieved in terms of neighbourhood management, local area cooperation, and how we deal with antisocial behaviour so that we provide safe, clean areas for our tenants to live in. So the standard is about neighbourhood and communal areas, keeping them clean and safe, working in partnership. We have to systematically self-assess ourselves and see where we stand in relation to those elements. So this report describes how we publish our intentions in respect of maintaining, improving the neighbourhoods. It talks of the housing service plan and how things start at that higher level, and consultation with tenants is very much part of that process. So it gives some examples from last year's plan and then from this year's service plan. So you can see that, in fact, from these examples, that we do invest in our communities. In fact, very few other social landlords now, particularly across the southwest, have their own community development officers nowadays, and we are proud of the difference that we are able to make by having this focus, and the opportunities that we provide for people as well. Similarly, it says that you must work in partnership with colleagues and other organisations, including actively involving tenants in all aspects of the service. So we do have an updated resident involvement strategy that we brought to you at the tail end of last year. Again, we offer we believe a greater range of involvement opportunities than most social landlords in the West Country. So on that front, I do feel that we measure up well against the standard. So I do believe that's a strength for us, but our response, or emerging response in relation to ASB in our communities, I think perhaps less so. And you might find that this report doesn't, so I don't know, somebody's pressed their thing by mistake, I think. So moving on to ASB, with ASB, the regulator requires that social housing providers shall publish a policy on how they work with relevant partners. And also, it goes on to describe how within our ASB policy, we do that. That was authorised by, that policy was authorised by the board in 2018 in March. So we are also members of the East Devon and Mid Devon Community Safety Partnership, and it describes our work with those partners as well. So we do work closely with them to deliver our response across the district, and it does make a difference, and I believe that we can show that too. So the report sets out the areas where we must comply on the left, as well as how we do it. So I'll canter through these areas. The first area is that tenants must be made aware of their responsibilities and rights in relation to ASB, and we talk about, we do this through the tenancy agreement, the tenant handbook, new tenant visits, We also have our Housing Matters magazine that goes out regularly, and increasing use now of social media. So we have Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts. Strong leadership, commitment and accountability on preventing and tackling ASB. So we have an ASB policy, we have 5 dedicated estate management officers, we have weekly case meetings, joint training on legal processes. We're members of the Devon Fraud Forum. We are members of the East Devon and Mid Devon Community Safety Partnership, and East Devon funds the Community Safety Officer for the district. So there's a strong focus, we must have a strong focus on preventative measures, and we do, I believe. We attend youth vulnerability and ASB group meetings with the police, with social services, education partners in some cases. We attend East and Mid Devon locality partnership meetings that work for the benefit of young people. We founded over this last year the East Devon Mental Health Group, working with GPs and mental health teams locally because we found that we needed more support for our work in that area. We have the 5 dedicated community development workers and also attend local action groups with the police, community safety officer regular meetings with them, other local stakeholders to discuss hotspots and where we have issues in particular and how we can jointly provide interventions to prevent further ASB from occurring. Next, we have to look at prompt, appropriate and decisive action, show that we take this. I believe that we've detailed in the report how we do this and how we escalate where appropriate, but also offer an approach that where we offer mediation and other softer options where we can. We very much see eviction and taking someone's home. It's something that we don't do lightly at all. So we have a number of related strategies, they're listed, and policies in place. But of course, it's how we implement these in practice that really counts. We have a duty to ensure that all tenants or residents can easily report ASB and how they can be kept informed about the status of their case. And also, it talks of provision of support to victims and witnesses. And this is where I have a slightly different view from when I wrote this report before lockdown. And lockdown has changed a lot of things for us, but in particular, and there are many areas where we're having to change the way that we look at things and the way that we do things as we come out of it. And this is certainly one area for me. So although the report, I do stand by it, the report does explain how we do this, and I do have this updated view now. So since lockdown, we have worked more with environmental health, or during lockdown, with environmental health, the community safety officer. Examples of this will be where we had the arson attacks to our flats, and so we've been working very closely with community safety on our response to that, which has been very helpful, particularly with the background that he has of working with the police. But also where, because government has brought in these changes and the courts are not yet back to normal, our ability to monitor and respond to and take more formal action through the courts is limited currently. So what we have been doing is working more closely with environmental health, community safety officer, and in some cases where it's been appropriate for us to be able to serve community protection warning letters on people, and then community protection notices. So we've done that. Then when they're in breach of it, if that has escalated, in some cases that has just stopped them in their tracks, and they're just, I don't know if they're pausing to see what they're going to do next, but certainly that's personally served on them, so they do seem to react to that. but there are other cases where they are in breach of it. We have to serve the notice, and environmental health then have powers where they can take further action in conjunction with the police. So we've done that, but that's just an example of how we're having to sort of adapt and change the way we respond to these situations. But since we've come out, since we've been partially coming back out of lockdown, there's a bit of lag there almost, I think. I think for some people in the community, it was right, okay, they should be back out now, these council workers, they should be out and dealing with things, and why aren't they, you know, doing something about my neighbour or whoever it may be? And it feels like we have multiple cases coming in, many through local councillors, where people have become frustrated by our lack of progress over the months. So they were okay at the time, but I guess they had, you know, other things to think about, didn't they, as we all did with COVID. But since then, they are wanting progress and they want it now. So we are trying to keep up, and the volume of such inquiries has indicated to me that I need now to set in place a review for our current arrangements. So it's just these last couple of boxes on the table there, particularly where it has shown issues to me is around communication. We've really struggled to keep that communication. We've communicated really well throughout COVID and people's well-being, but generally, in terms of keeping complainants up to date of progress, even when there is none, is not a strength. So we need to make sure that we do bolster that up within the service that we're giving, and need to review our current arrangements to ensure better communication and support of complainants, which can go a long way to helping them at a time when they're perhaps not able to deal with the perpetrators themselves, and nor are we, as efficiently as normal. But at least if they feel that we are listening and we're doing what we can, I think that's very helpful. They can be difficult conversations and uncomfortable if we're not able to take much action, but at least we should stand up and be counted, so to speak, I think. So as I say, there are many processes across the service that need to be updated, and this is most certainly one of them in my view. I propose to take the opportunity to tackle this piece of work as a priority. I've started mapping it out this week, and I want to do it with the help of JCAP, who's our service review group for estate management. We'll be practicing our Zoom skills, Peter. And as I say, I think this tenant input will be very helpful, I am sure. And that's all I have to say. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments they'd like to make.
Thank you, Sue.
Chair, can I, Chair, it's for just one comment, just to update the issue of legal proceedings, antisocial behaviour. Actually, there was a stay put in place by the courts of 3 months for all evictions, whether it's rent arrears or antisocial behaviour due down to COVID. That has now been slightly modified. Rent arrears actions are still stayed for a period of time up until September, and severe rent arrears cases can be progressed, as now can antisocial behaviour. Antisocial behaviour cases, notices can be served and action taken immediately. So whilst COVID closed down court proceedings, those court proceedings now are back and operational for antisocial cases. I just wanted to make sure that the board was clear on that.
Yeah, thank you. From our position in estate management, that sort of means it doesn't complicate it, because obviously we've been working on putting together the cases for the putting together the bundles to get to Giles in legal for the cases where we need to advance. But it does create, it just means that that's all got to be prioritised as well as responding to these inquiries and complaints that have come in. So we do just need to be really clear on how we're dealing with all those. Yeah, so it just adds to my review of how we need to tackle that.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Peter, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with Sue that we need to get back some of these tenant groups and get them trained on Zoom so we can move forward. But mainly, through this report, you did mention the Community Safety Partnership. And unfortunately, because of COVID, you took our officer away from the Community Safety Partnership, and so we couldn't hold any local action groups. I've just been informed this week that they're going to start again very soon, and David Wareham is I think he's as frustrated as we are because we're not getting the information from all the groups, which is what we do on the local action groups, and that is making it harder for some areas for you to move forward. So good news all round, I think.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Sue, as always. Sue, through you, Chairman, Sue, this report is what I'd expect from you. It's always very thorough, and it's really interesting listening to you that you've changed your mind in certain areas during COVID. I don't know who hasn't changed their mind on certain aspects during COVID, but I have always maintained the neighbourhood management and the housing development and estate management are absolutely imperative when it actually says about building communities. We really need to ensure that that care is maintained at all times. We know our tenants are very much going through it like anyone else in society, and they need as much support as they possibly can. As it's just been said, David Whelan had to be used in other areas of emergency during COVID. Understandable, and it's good that it started back up, and I believe the Axminster one has started today on the lags. But what was really pleasing for me, Sue, was reading at 3.3, the bottom bullet point was developing and adopting a mental health strategy for housing. If there was ever a time we needed that, it certainly is now. And we do know that there are so many families that are really having a difficult time. And being all cramped up like it is for Christmas sometimes, but stretched out over months, has been incredibly pressurized for many. Now, when we're looking at the area of antisocial behaviours, and I have said it, and I do apologise, Chair, if I sound like a broken record, what East Devon does is great. The housing officers, we're really fortunate. And I am absolutely convinced, because of our strategy on housing development and estate management and the housing officers, we are actually able to save money because these people have got their fingers on the post. What really does concern me is that we have other housing providers, affordable housing, private landlords, etc., across East Devon. Now, we as the elected members, we represent everybody, but you could have a totally different approach from another housing provider, another housing association, than what we've just heard here today. And I have continuously asked, please, can all the housing providers, along with East Devon, just get around a table, look at what best practices, and if either of the associations or East Devon as a housing provider need any support, we're there to help each other. Because we could have an issue going on in East Devon housing, and I know that it will be looked at very quickly. And I'm really pleased to know that people come to me as their elected ward member, and I welcome that. And if necessary, I need to be a conduit, and I'm sure the other elected members would agree. And I also get correspondence from people who aren't in the housing stock of East Devon, but are in other areas, but they get incredibly frustrated. You could have an East Devon housing stock and next door another housing provider. You have two different approaches when it comes to antisocial behaviour, or at best, some approach support from another housing provider, if at all. Now, this is what concerns me, because this is about building communities as well as our own housing stock. And as I've asked, and I get bored of repeating myself, is can we look at some strategic thinking that our leads can actually get together with all the other housing providers and look at what's best practice. It could help everybody who provides housing, and it could help the residents of East Devon. But as I said through you, Chair, on the outset, this report Sue has given was absolutely superb as always, and I'm very much in favour of supporting the beacon, what this has become for the residents of East Devon. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Answers? No. Okay.
Chairman, could I ask, please? Could we have an action on that, please? Because I don't think I've ever actually asked for it to be action. I've taken it for granted that something would be action. If the board don't agree with me, I can understand that. But if the board do agree with me, can we put some meat on the bones, please?
Okay. I need some guidance on this one. Does it go down as a proposal or?
Well, Chair, you can ask Councillor Hall for a recommendation, and we obviously need a seconder. We do obviously need some words, and obviously that piece of work will need to be scoped. I mean, obviously, if he's asking for us to get around the table with other housing providers in East Devon, I mean, obviously we need to do some sort of preparatory work to sort of build those relationships and then start to talk about a strategic approach if that's what his aim is.
Which I think is.
Well, Chairman, through you, this is something that I actually feels the right way, but I'm only one member of the board. But what I would say, Chair, I am more than willing, if the board do agree, that I email you as the chairman, that you could give it due consideration, and then it could be moved forward, and then hopefully the board can make a decision and hopefully maybe recommend it to cabinet if need be. But I'd like to think that this could possibly be done from our housing review board direct to all the housing providers.
Might it be something then that that you work with the lead, the housing lead and Sue to move that forward as a piece of work to look at, but we just note this report, and then it's something that they can bring. It's a report that they can bring to the board when they've had an opportunity to think about how they might progress that in the best way. So obviously there's a lot of scoping work that needs to be done there.
Yeah.
Chair, I'm like I said, I'm more than happy if I get some direction offline from the officers. Do I need to be going via the portfolio holder, which is Megan Armstrong, obviously Homes and Communities? Just give me a bit of direction. I'll put some meat on the bones, and then I'll send it to you if that's the appropriate route, Chairman, and then for your consideration.
Yeah, I haven't got a problem with that. I think personally, I think it should go through Megan. Obviously, I can be advised otherwise. Megan, if you're still on board. Megan, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Are you?
Yeah.
Are you happy?
Yeah, I'm happy. I think what would you prefer, Chair? How would you like it to go? I mean, I think it would need. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
So I just think we do. As Ian just said, you know, it comes through me, and then you and I obviously have a chat and decide what route we take from there to try and pull together if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Ian? You happy with that, Ian?
I'm happy with that. I'm happy to take it to the portfolio and yourself. I'll copy in for your consideration. But I mean, with the greatest respect to me in my position, I think the portfolio holder is going to have a little bit more clout than I am.
Right. Thank you, Ian. Okay.
I don't know about that, Ian.
Okay, moving on. So on this particular item, do I just have to note the contents?
To note the contents of the self to note the contents of the self-assessment document as set out within the report.
And move on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No other questions. We will move on. Item 16, and time's ticking away still. The COVID-19 housing recovery. Amy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we have attempted to keep you members up to date, I guess more so from an operational perspective over the last few months, but it did feel right to present a summary today that relates to our initial COVID response and our ongoing recovery position, which I think we'll all appreciate that due to the current circumstances nationally, I have to say is under constant review. So as we were going into this pandemic, we took the decision to establish 4 key priorities, and those are set out on pages 71 and 72 of the report. What we then did is to find a series of actions under each of those that we really felt was the right way that we should be prioritising things at the time based on the circumstances that we were facing. We put a huge amount of focus on communication, so this has ensured regular updates on our website. We did a special edition of our Housing Matters magazine. And going on one stage further than that, and I think Sue did mention it earlier, we've also undertaken wellbeing calls for every single resident across our entire stock. So you'll be aware of this sort of support that we offer to our sheltered housing residents. But what we recognise in the midst of this pandemic is that actually we needed to reach out wider. So we've opened this out to all general purpose residents, and we've got some good feedback from that. It's been very reassuring, and we've been assisting people with a range of practical problems as a result of these calls. So assisting them with food packages, directing them with medication or support groups that are set up in their areas. So that was really good and mirrored some of the work that our corporate hub group were doing at the time as well. So as we touched upon earlier in the first report, some very intense work had to be undertaken in relation to repairs and how this could be managed. This was also the case for gas safety and our annual gas safety checks. Members will be aware that we pride ourselves on the 100% compliant position all the time on this, but it's something that we take very, very seriously. So this did drop during COVID, mainly because of residents who were shielding. So we had to quickly consider how we would manage this. And this resulted in the creation of our own COVID-19 gas safety policy that followed government advice in this area. But it was really encouraging actually at the time to be sort of ahead of the curve. So we were already putting some of those plans in place. The government guidance came through and it just sort of rubber stamped the position that we knew we had to take. So compliance did drop through that period, as it did, I think, for most landlords in the country. But I am pleased to report today, and you'll see that in the reports later, that we are back to 100% now. So you'll see as well that we identified a set of COVID-19 key performance indicators. Page 73 gives you an example of this. So what we did is we considered very carefully what the key areas of the service were that we needed to monitor through this period. And this really helped us with response, and it informed very much our recovery plans, and still is as we go along. So we'll come on to Rob's finance report shortly, although it's John's today, I think, because Rob's not here. So we'll come on to John's report shortly. But you will note rental income is one of the key areas, which remains, I have to say, right up until now, looking pretty good, despite what some in the sector are seeing. We need to be very mindful of the next few months. So ending of the furlough scheme, reported rises that we're already seeing in job losses and unemployment could hit our tenants hard. So you'll see in the report that we've adapted very much a position around proactively encouraging residents to contact us early if they see problems ahead. So we can offer support at that stage as opposed to allowing arrears to build up too much. In relation to continued recovery, as I said at the beginning, we'll wait cautiously now, I guess, to see what the next few weeks, few months are going to bring. The senior housing leadership team have and will continue to meet on a weekly basis to review where we are and what might need to change based on where we are nationally and locally. I can't tell you in terms of how much, guidance is coming down continually still from central government. So we're continually looking at that and then looking at our services in order to make sure that we're where we need to be. As a frontline service, members will appreciate that, response and recovery very much are sort of come hand in hand. So we went into what we called response mode, but that's very much had to continue to keep the service running as we've taken steps out of recovery. So these two things sort of come hand in hand. Overall, and in summary, it would be wrong to say that we haven't faced some of the biggest challenges ever, but I'm personally really proud of what our teams have achieved in order to keep our service running through times I'm sure most would agree that we couldn't have really imagined. And I'll leave it there, Chair, in case there's any questions. As I say, it's just a summary report.
Thank you very much, Amy. I don't see no blue hands, but I did have an indication from Paul Miller. Councillor Miller, you still want to comment on this one?
No, I'll comment on the next report, conscious of time.
Okay,
Chair.
that's fine. Councillor Gizzard.
Thank you, Chair. It's just I just wanted to congratulate Amy and all the team at East Devon, because as you said, it's been a horrendous time, and we don't know how things are going to pan out over the next couple of days or weeks. But I think the way that East Devon has operated with regards to the assistance with rent and rates, and also the phone calls that residents have received, I think has to be applauded. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gizzard, and I second what you just said. Councillor Hall.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Amy, well done. I really enjoyed reading this report. It's been really challenging. But one thing we've got to be mindful, it's been challenging for you officers as well. Now, through you, Chair, I'd just really like to put a seed in someone's mind here, whoever it be, Megan, be it Amy, be it Giles. Has there been any survey of our officers, housing officers, on how they've been during COVID, and be that across the East Devon spectrum when it comes to any officers who's doing a fantastic job, because it will help us identify their own health and well-being and during this incredibly challenging time for all of us. We need you guys to be on top form to do that great service you do for the people of East Devon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So thank you, Chair. I'll take that one. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Ian. From the very start of this, we have put a huge amount of focus on the health and well-being of our own officers, appreciating that, you know, they've had many challenges around residents, homeschooling, all of that sort of stuff. And, you know, we've required them to keep the service running at the same time as all of that. So from a housing perspective, I've placed a huge amount of pressure on the managers to make sure that, you know, where we're in a world now where we feel very isolated and where we, you know, can't get all our teams in a room and have those face-to-face discussions, that managers are going out of their way to make sure that our officers are okay and that they are coping and that we are supporting them in any way that we can. And that doesn't just go for housing, that goes across the whole organisation. In direct response to your question, yes, Ian, we have done a survey. So that was led by our housing human resources team, where we asked all of our staff to complete the survey in relation to their health and well-being, their mental health, how they were feeling, how supported they felt throughout, and a range of other questions. And we were really pleased with the outcome, actually. So, you know, generally it is felt that officers have felt supported through this. We've put a lot of things in place, as I say. We've allowed time for managers to take to make sure that their teams are okay. The issue of isolation is still one of great concern, but we're keeping up, you know, everything that we need to do around that. So our housing officers were surveyed along with the rest of the organisation. There are results to that survey, and you know, we can circulate them. They were pretty good. They were very encouraging. But we mustn't lose sight of this, you know, in relation to the direction we could be going in the next few weeks. Thank you, Chair.
Amy. Thank you. Okay, Peter. Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's just on the protecting residents' income and livelihoods. We're going to see a lot of changes between now and probably the beginning of next year. And I'm just wondering how East Devon are going to protect the residents from income, because I can see further unemployment coming along at the moment, especially as we are quite a seasonal area, and we do already have spikes in unemployment over winter periods, and I don't think this COVID is actually helping. And I'm just wondering if we've got anything planned for when we start coming out of COVID, on how we can move forward with that. And one of the areas I was thinking of was the agreement we've got with Ian Williams that they would actually take on East Devon tenant staff or on their staffing list. So I'm just wondering if Amy could come back on that one for me.
Amy?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, you're right, Peter. There's a real uncertainty about the next few months ahead. We've been looking, so Subius and I have been discussing this week about, proactively what we can do. So I mentioned earlier about that need to encourage tenants to come to us at the very earliest of stages when they see problems on the horizon, before they've happened, so that we can help get them into the strongest position possible and also support them through that. It's about making sure that we can ensure that residents are receiving all the benefits that they're entitled to. So our rental officers are trained up to the, that they're very aware of everything that residents can claim, and they often support tenants through those processes. They can be quite cumbersome, as you can imagine, and our guys spend a lot of time with residents sort of going through those motions, which are very, very important. Your third comment in relation to Ian Williams, excellent suggestion, Peter. You're absolutely right. We have bedded that into the contract as one of our social value areas to consider over the course of the contract. And I think that's a great suggestion. And I will encourage the property and asset manager to have a discussion with Aaron about how we can take that forward, because if there's ever a time that we should be thinking about some of those employment initiatives, it is absolutely now. So great suggestion, Peter.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay. Thank you very much. Right, moving on. I think again we just got to note the contents of this report. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairman.
Sorry?
That's correct, Chairman.
Right. Okay, so we can move on to the next agenda item, which is number 17, the financial report up to the end of August 2020. I got it down as Rob Ward. I'm not sure if that's right or not.
So, Chair, as I understand, Rob, yeah, it's going to be John. Sorry, John.
I thought it was, yeah.
No worries.
Over to you, John.
Thank you. Yes, so the finance report provides a picture of the current financial position up to month 5, so to the end of August. Since the last update to the committee, we've obviously been through financial year end, which resulted in 960,000 being added to the HRA balance. So that now stands at just over £4 million. So along with this balance, other available reserves are detailed at table 1.4 in the report. That totals 9.142 million. The amount in the general fund reserve over and above the adopted level, plus the volatility reserve, these two total 3.6 million, and it's this sum that's available should COVID impact upon the HRA finances. And paragraph 2.5 just provides a few scenarios of what significant COVID impact could be withstood using these available reserves. Just moving into section 2 of the report, it covers an income impact assessment, which shows the collection rates and the income levels are materially consistent with the prior year, and the table at 2.4 provides some numbers behind this. Section 3 of the report is detailing expenditure. To the end of August, there was an underspend of just over £4.5 million, but this is forecast to be just over 2 million by the year end. The underspend, as has been described earlier, is due to COVID restrictions in place, and this is why the report is recommending the reallocation of these budgets. So those reallocations are detailed in section 5 of the report. So there's quite a lot of detail there. Section 4 just highlights the effects of COVID on the capital expenditure so far this year, and it highlights the possibility of having to return receipts to government. There has been a 6-month extension on having to spend those receipts within the, I believe it's a 3-year time limit, but we're hopeful of a further extension to avoid any repayments. And then the final section, which is section 6 from page 81, it provides details around the grant application for the Green Homes grant. Again, it was mentioned earlier, it's for £500,000, and it requires 600,000 sort of match funding from the council. So the funding sources for that match funding is detailed at 6.3. So that's the main detail there. And again, as it was mentioned, we should know by the 28th if the bid is being successful. So it's a quick canter through the report, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. The everyone in approach set by national government has been a huge humanitarian effort by councils to get our residents off the street and into accommodation, which I imagine has significantly increased the cost of the council spending on temporary accommodation. And councils will know that I take a keen interest in monitoring these costs. 6 years ago, we were spending less than £20,000 a year on temporary accommodation, but we had spent over £200,000 a year in year 2018-19, and also over £200,000 in 2019-20. What I want to know is what the figures are currently projected to be in 2020-21. Are we, as I expect, looking at a record high spend? And I wondered, what can we do to mitigate this? I believe that rather than relying on the goodwill and the huge costs of B&Bs, hotels and private landlords to house the homeless, we should be investing more in our own stock, as we have done with Sailors' Rest. So I just wanted to open that question up for officers and members to respond to.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Anyone who wants that before I call in Councillor Hall? Amy?
So can I, so just coming back on that, so the homelessness, the area of homelessness that you're talking about, Councillor Miller, obviously does come under the general fund. So those costs won't be captured in this report because that's not within the remit of the Housing Review Board.
Sorry.
But we can of course get you up-to-date figures on what that's looking like. Obviously, you're right. There's been some significant costs in that area, but I can't go into detail on that now because it's not within the remit of the Housing Review Board. But we've got those figures, and we can have that discussion offline.
I understand. Apologies, Chair.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Hall.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak. 4.2, page 80, the right to buy receipts, Q3 target 3.4 million, committed 1.7 million. We need significant investment opportunities need to be found, or obviously the receipts go back to central government. That's the last thing we want, and that has been one consistent message since I've been an elected member. Now, with what I said really at the early stages of this meeting about First Avenue in Axminster, that could be a significant investment. Alternatively, Chair, there could be affordable housing providers out there who are not so interested in East Devon as they was before. So is there the appetite there to buy some of their housing stock to increase our housing stock? I'm only seeing this from my eyes, what I see on a day-to-day basis. And I do think there might be some legs in buying from some of the other housing providers. If that can be done, Charles will be advised, obviously. But like I said, a significant investment. We've got it right here in Axminster. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Just to, from my own point of view, Ian, what you just said is something that, again, has been mentioned quite a few times over the last couple of weeks regarding the return of the money, what we can use it for, etc. I know that's something that Megan and I are looking at as well. But obviously, if anyone else wants to sort of answer, Ian.
So we are just just to say that we are constantly obviously looking out for these opportunities. Obviously, we've had some restrictions with that over the last few months, but as I say, we've been under this regime now for a number of years. We've been pleased to date not to have to pay back a single penny, which is a good position to be in. We know that some of our neighbours have had to pay some of this back, and that must be pretty painful. So we are out there, we are looking for these opportunities where they come up, and as we say, our stock acquisition program, where we've been buying properties back into the stock, has been part of how we've been achieving the spend there to date. I think it's just worth pointing out that obviously we don't get the whole cost funded back, so we have to fund. We only get 30% of the sale that we're able to invest. So we do have to put some of our own funding for that as well, with significant pressures across the service, such as the energy efficiency stuff we talked about, needing to see the outcome of a stock condition survey. We do need to be mindful about, you know, all of these different priorities that are coming together and what we can realistically afford moving forward, I think is probably my view on that. But we are, as I say, we are open to these opportunities. If developers want to come to us with opportunities, we do have those discussions. It's been a difficult time over the last few months, but we are constantly sort of open to that.
So for you, Chair, may I ask another question, please?
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, so for you again, Chair. Amy, so do you, as a senior officer, speak to other housing providers about floating these ideas about possibly buying from other housing stock? And finally, and I'm sorry I keep speaking, Chair, we don't have to pay for the land at First Avenue. We already own it.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, so sorry, Ian, just on your second point, yeah. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, carry on, Amy, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. On your second point, yeah, it's different if obviously our land presents different opportunities if that's actual housing land, because that's owned by the housing revenue account. So that's a different opportunity. We do have these discussions, yes, with other housing providers. We've got good relationships through our housing enabling officers with our RPs. There's not been much of a appetite to do much recently. They are lots of the Homes England grant has been scooped up by lots of the RPs in the area, and they're sort of progressing with their own plans on that. But yeah, we are in touch with them, and we do have regular discussions about what opportunities there may be.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Megan.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to Councillor Hall. Yeah, I'm really keen. I'm hoping, I've not got a full list yet of members who are interested in joining in my new housing portfolio team meeting, which will be coming up fairly soon, hopefully. So I'm hoping that Ian has put his name forward. Can you say, Ian, whether you have or not? Because this is exactly the sort of thing that I want us to be discussing in that.
Well, absolutely, you know, I will. I've been breathing the air all my life, so yes, count on it.
So that's something we can just really get our teeth into, I'm hoping, in that portfolio team, because it's a fairly informal group. It's what used to be the think tanks, you remember, Ian, and we can just all have a natter. It's cross-party, just decide, you know, just bring up all the various issues that are facing our housing service at the moment, and what we can do as members, rather than, well, as well as officers, but mainly members, so that we can challenge some of the things that are going on and take up these possible opportunities that you talk about in Axminster. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm hoping you'll be in there and, you know, with your colleagues. So thank you for that, for raising it.
Cross party is the way to work.
It is, yeah. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, there's no more hands on the board. So we have got recommendations here. Giles?
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah,
Giles, like
the
to read this out?
recommendation is that the Housing Review Board is invited to agree the budget reallocations within the report, note the impact assessments, and approve the report on the housing revenue account financial position to the end of August 2020 and recommend it to Cabinet. So it's a straight yes or no.
Okay.
Okay, Chairman, you happy for me to start the vote?
Yeah, carry on.
Thank you, Chairman. So we'll start with you, Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain?
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy Collier, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hall?
Yes.
Thank you. Christine Morrison?
Thank you, Christine. I think that was a yes.
Yes, it was.
Thank you very much. And Peter Sullivan, please.
Yes.
Thank you. That's unanimously carried, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we move on to the next one, which is stock condition survey, item 18. And who's on that one? Amy, is
Thank
it
you,
you
Chair.
again?
It's me again. Yeah.
You were tired the
So,
other night.
As already mentioned throughout the meeting actually today, and I set out in the report, members will note that will note in this a multiple number of reasons it is absolutely critical that we get on with this. We've not collected this information in this way since 2011, and with the significant work that's taken place across the stock since then, it's really important that we get an up-to-date position of where we are. This is an excellent opportunity to survey our stock in relation to energy efficiency measures as well, as already mentioned, and it also links very closely with what Giles was talking about in relation to our approach to managing disrepair. So we have already brought this to you through the service plan, where this was highlighted as an urgent objective to complete this year. We've not been able to progress that as quickly as we'd hoped. We had hoped at the beginning of this year we'd be making some significant progress, but then as we've seemed to be repeated theme through this meeting, COVID came along and sort of pushed us off that in terms of time frame. But we are now in a position where we have convened discussions, and we're picking this up as part of our recovery, still as a very urgent objective that we need to complete. And I am personally going to be pushing the officers to make sure that that starts this side of Christmas. So we've engaged with a procurement framework who can facilitate the opportunity for us to direct award this work with an approved stock condition surveyor contractor. We now deem this the most efficient way to get on with it. Preliminary discussions have started and we're beginning to gear up to take this forward. There is a significant amount of work to do in the background as preparation, such as the format of the data and our interfaces that will be required to ensure that when we collect this massive amount of data, we can get it into our systems in the most efficient way. And then most importantly, we can interpret that and use it as we need to inform our asset management strategies. We don't want to get into a situation again where this data is out of date. So we are therefore proposing that moving forward, we have a rolling, once we've done 100% of the stock, we have a rolling 5-year programme to ensure that the information is always kept up to date. We've not started pricing discussions yet, but obviously this will be managed through the framework. So there is some sort of comfort there. Our own procurement officers have approved us going through that in terms of making sure we can prove value for money. So we've set aside an initial 75,000 to start the work. So that's not asking for additional budget today. That's already been approved. And I would just say that we need to be on standby for more budget as we go forward. And yeah, once we know what that position is, we will potentially need to assign budget from other areas of the housing revenue account to make sure that we can get this done. And that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Councillor Gizzard.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question to Amy. Does that mean then, Amy, that someone will go around and check every of the 4,200 council houses?
Yes, Steve. Yes, that's it. So it will be a stock condition surveyor. We'll have all those communications in place, obviously in terms of communicating with residents around when it will be, how it will be done and everything like that. But yes, in essence, that's exactly what it means.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Right, there's no other blue hands on the board, so I assume we go straight to the
recommendation.
Giles.
Oh, I think Councillor Chamberlain has just
sorry.
raised a hand.
Yeah,
She's
sorry,
crossing in
Councillor Chamberlain. Carry on, sorry.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I just have a question really about the stock condition surveys that we have in place at the moment. Can you tell me what percentage of the properties that we actually have stock data on, and how much more and how in date that is?
Amy?
Hi, Sarah. So no, in essence, no, but I can get that information to you, but I haven't got it to hand. I can get all that information to you, and we will circulate it after the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you. I'd be really interested to see some of that data. Thank you.
Sorry, I haven't. I can't go to town, but we can get it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Right, Giles.
The recommendation is to approve the delivery of the stock condition survey by an external consultant sourced through an improved procurement framework. And the answer is yes or no.
Okay, we'll put it to the vote.
Okay, Chairman, starting with you, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain?
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy Collier, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hall?
Yes.
Thank you. Christine Morrison, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Christine. And Peter Sullivan, finally, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Peter. That is unanimously carried, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Chair, might I just intervene at this point and ask for a very quick 2-minute comfort break, please?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing myself. Okay, 2 minutes, get a drink or do what you got to do, and we'll be back.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Ready to go, Chairman?
Yeah, I'm back on. Thank you. Sorry about that. Right. Okay. Are we ready to go?
Yes,
Everyone
Chair, I
back?
think we're all ready.
Okay. Next item, number 19, formal complaints. Sue.
Yes, me again. Thank you. This is a report that I bring to the board every year to update you with information on formal complaints received in relation to the whole of housing service. So this year, I'm reporting on the period April 2019 to the end of March this year, 2020. So you'll see there are a number of recommendations ranging from an action for senior managers to reinforce all the messages, operational managers to review processes together, formal complaints and member inquiries. And there's one about the new code of guidance, which has been provided by the Housing Ombudsman. And there's also one about the importance of communication. This is directly from the DTPG, the Designated Tenant Participation Group, about the importance of communication and achieving the expectation of our customers. So the contents of the report takes you through the authority's corporate complaint system. So most housing organisations will have their own, but because we're part of EDDC, we use the corporate complaint system, but we do have a little bit that we've tagged on the end for housing. So you will be familiar, I imagine, most of you, with the formal complaint system. But as I say, there's the extra bit for housing in the process that other services do not have, and that is the designated person. So you have stage 1, stage 2. If customers are still not satisfied after the 2 formal stages, they can take their complaint to the Housing Ombudsman. They have to wait 8 weeks currently to do that after their final response letter from stage 2. And then they can go to the Ombudsman, or they can contact a designated person. As was mentioned earlier in the meeting, the designated person can be a district councillor, but it also can be a local MP or the designated tenant complaints panel. We have found over the years that usually the one that seems to have been most well used out of these 3 options has been the designated tenant complaint panel. It seems that many tenants favour getting the view of their peers in terms of reviewing the council's decision previously made on their case. So the report then goes on to give the breakdown of complaints received during this period and some explanation of what you're looking at. So touching on a little bit of that, you will see in the table that there is an increase in the number of new stage 1 complaints received. But hopefully there has been a decrease in the time taken to issue a full response. The number of complaints about staff and customer service has remained the same, but predominantly the complaints are concerning repairs and maintenance and allocation of properties. A couple of provisos here though. So although the number of complaints about staff and customer service has remained the same, because the overall number of complaints has increased, I suppose if you're trying to find a little bit of joy in here somewhere, at least it is that would be a smaller percentage of the whole would be to do with customer service and staff, issues about staff. The other thing is, you may also note that there's been a reduction with the number of ASB cases, and you may hold the view, and we touched on this in my last report, that this is not how it feels currently, because it's possible, particularly for council members, that because you may well be aware of several cases in your area that you've brought through, so it might feel like, well, that can't be right, surely, that there's only one estate management ASB case. So there are a few reasons for that. One is that council inquiries are not the subject of this report. So this report currently is about formal complaints, and your inquiries do not come through the formal complaint system. Therefore, they're not recorded in the same way. There's also the fact that the period this is covering is last financial year, so it only takes us up to March 2020. So it only just takes us into the very beginning of the lockdown period. So, as I say, this vast increase in numbers of customer, councillor and MP inquiries that are coming through are would not have happened during that period, because actually this increase has just happened as we've come out of lockdown. But it does seem to me that I can include in next year's report, which will include this, which would cover the period of this increase. I could, if you wanted, include a piece on councillor inquiries and MP inquiries and give you some facts and figures on those, if it would be useful, because we've had such an increase that we've started to monitor them as an overall figure and number, just purely to make sure that we are responding, because we've had a few slip through our fingers. So what's the next bit? So we've got the facts and figures there. We then see some information on ombudsman cases, and you can see there has been an improvement in this area also. As the local government ombudsman cases for 2019-2020, there were no local government ombudsman or housing ombudsman decisions for this year. So the designated tenant complaints panel has provided some information also and included some of its findings when they've been discussing cases throughout the year. Interestingly, they're the very first tenant group that we got back with, because they've at the end, when we were still under lockdown, actually, we did have a couple of Skype meetings. We've got a couple of the members of the group are on our tenant board members. It's not the easiest, because we're doing it via Skype and some people are only ringing in via their phone, but we've managed to keep going with those. So there's some information that they've given, and they've translated then into the recommendations. Also, we've looked at a few other ways that we monitor complaints, such as the satisfaction monitoring surveys, the arrangements under the new repairs contract, and the fact that we do, in a normal world, through our service review groups, which are groups of tenants who help us monitor the service in different areas. So we've got those for repairs, sheltered housing, and estate management. So finally, the report takes us through the new Ombudsman Code of Conduct, explains the background, why we have this, why the Ombudsman has felt they need to change things, and come up with a new framework that will promote high quality complaints handling, which will be better for both tenants and landlords. So the objective is not to punish, but rather to be more accessible, faster, and bring consistency across the sector. So landlords are being asked to self-assess against the code by 31st of December this year and to publish the results. So we're working with the authority's corporate complaints team and the DTPG, designated tenant participation, designated tenant
complaints panel.
Yes, thank you. No, it's PG, so something else. But I think I've mixed up two acronyms. That's what's happened.
Yeah,
to make sure, to make sure we are compliant before the deadline. Non-compliance could result in the Housing Ombudsman issuing a complaint handling failure order, so we don't want that right from the get-go. Guidance on these new orders has also been published, and these will be implemented from the 1st of January. So we need to get a wriggle on and get that done. It is advocated that the designated person, so this is not us advocating, this is the Ombudsman indicating that the designated person provision would be removed from the complaints process. And of course, we were all shooting up our little virtual hands saying, what about the designated complaint panels? Because our own one has been so useful, in my opinion, to us. and they've suggested that they imagine that for a lot of organisations that will be kept, because but not necessarily as a mandatory part of the process, which is pretty similar to now. You don't have to have one, but if tenants locally want one, if you find it useful, then you can have one. So I would like now, with the chair's agreement, to hand over quickly to Peter Sullivan, who is the chairman of the panel and as such has helped put this report together.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Sue for this. I think we're actually looking at two completely different periods, as you've mentioned, because this is only, like I said, it's only up to March this year. So we can only really compare this to previous years. And I think we are in a lot better position than what we used to be. Since March, of course, we know everything has altered and that will come on next year's. But as Sue has said, we've actually restarted the complaints panel, albeit with Zoom. And some of us struggled at the beginning, but we're getting there with it. And the other thing which really, both myself and Sue attended via Zoom meetings with the Ombudsman. Unfortunately, we couldn't get there couldn't do it on the same days, but we both came up with the same questions. And that really was about this no longer having to have a designated person. And of course, the Ombudsman said this is so they can actually get through cases quicker, because they found that lots of delays were made through having to go through councillors and MPs. But they still felt that we could still keep the designated complaints panel as part of our system, because at first, when it was first muted, they were actually saying that they wished to get rid of all designated persons. And so, because this came about through the green paper, the Ombudsman has jumped the gun, because we haven't got the white paper provided yet, but the Ombudsman has changed his code, and this is part of his code, so it's nothing to do with East Devon about getting rid of the designated person. Really, any questions from anybody?
The only hand I got up at the moment is Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. My final contribution, I promise. So I am one of the three designated persons at East Devon District Council, along with Councillor Hall and Councillor Rowland. So that's the first I've heard about my role, I presume, being axed, because we were only reappointed back in May. The Green Paper actually reports that the designated person scheme works well in some areas, but not in others, because councillors sometimes don't understand the role. And I'll be totally honest. When I was elected last year, I didn't understand what the role was. And I will note that there's never been, or that there wasn't any training or organisational support for me. So over the year, I've had to work out the role for myself. So what I was going to do at the start of this was recommend to the committee to add a recommendation to ensure that the designated persons receive some training. But I'm wondering whether there'll be any point in that if that role is going to be scrapped. So some clarity, please, on when this new code of conduct will be coming into place and being enforced would be greatly appreciated. Because actually, to give some context, I received no approaches in my role as a designated person until lockdown. But since lockdown, I have received 5, and one of them I have referred to the Ombudsman. So I'd appreciate an answer on that. There's a couple other points I'll make. Sorry, Chair, for your forbearance. So referring to the table in the report, there has been a year-on-year 250% increase in complaints relating to property and contracting issues from 8 to 28. That's more complaints in the last financial year than the previous 3 financial years combined. So I'm presuming that this has something to do with the initial problems with our Ian Williams contract. So to hear earlier the relationship is improved, I mean, I'm hoping I can get assurance this number will significantly come down. From my experience of complaints, I believe part of the issue is about leading to complaints being escalated are to do with what residents consider to be the speed and efficacy of communication. And I think Sue Buse mentioned this earlier, and I hope that's understood. I'll finish there. Sorry, Chair, for going on.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Anyone want to answer? Any? No.
Sue, do you want to?
Yeah.
Oh, Amy's going to do it. Okay.
Well, I was just going to say, Stu, do you know the time? So Councillor Miller's first question in relation to time. I was just actually looking on my files to find the papers because I was just looking at implementation, but I can't locate them quickly. Do you know that date?
So yeah, we have to self-assess against the code by the 31st of December this year, and the new code comes in. It's implemented from the 1st of January. I would say because the designated person doesn't come through us in housing, so I look after and part of. I don't get involved in the decisions or anything in terms of the designated tenant group, but what I do is I sit in so that if they have any questions, or I can help signpost them to the right direction to get the information that they've identified they would like to see. But we don't get involved in the other designated person's role. So it might be that some sort of communication with Kate Symington from the corporate complaints team. And I believe that she's the one who's going to be looking at the new code and how, because we're part of the corporate complaint system, how that can be adapted to make sure it does satisfy the new code. So that could be something that either, I mean, I'm happy to raise it with her, but I don't know how the board would want to satisfy how you would suggest that's taken forward, you know, if you wanted something more formal.
Yeah, so I think that's where, because we have basically one complaint system, but it operates over different areas. So we have the tenants complaints, which is specifically for housing, and then you have the general council complaint system. And we've tried to marry them up over the years to work together, but I'm not sure because we only got the information from the housing ombudsman about the designated persons, so we can only talk on that side. I think probably you're right that Kate Symington needs to be involved with this to talk about how they talk about from the councillor's point of view, for the full council.
Yeah. So what I don't know is who looks after the other designated persons, whether there is somebody on your team, Alicia, Debbie, who does that, as you are directly connected with making sure that the council members are all set up properly in their roles, I imagine. So that might be another option. I don't know if there's one of you that has some involvement in that, or in this respect with designated person, or otherwise it would be Kate Symington. I would say the approach should be made to, and she is the person I understand that is getting involved in the review. She's the person I've made contact with to say, I and the designated tenant group would like to be involved in that, please.
Okay.
Can I just come back on Councillor Miller's second point as well, Chair?
Yeah.
Councillor Miller, I absolutely agree. The figures are quite horrifying in terms of numbers of complaints, and I would say yes, that had a lot to do with the transition phase that we had to go through at the time. That doesn't make it acceptable though, but it absolutely, in terms of the sort of significant changes to the service that we experienced, it absolutely was one of those things that we had to contend with. In terms of those actual complaints, I had a conversation actually just with Kate Green, who was on the call earlier, a a week or so ago about the not losing sight of the lessons learned approach that we need to take with these. So we as an organisation, Annie and Williams, need to go through the pain and unpick each one of those and understand exactly what went wrong and why it went wrong, and make sure that we've got processes in place to improve things as we go forward. You won't be surprised to know that obviously I'm keeping a very close eye on this area in relation to what they're looking like now. I am pleased to say that complaints, so formal complaints in relation to property and contractor issues have significantly reduced over the last quarter. But that's, you know, we're not in normal times. Obviously, we need to consider that things haven't been, it's not been business as usual. So we don't want to sort of let ourselves off the hook that easily. But it is an area that we're constantly monitoring. I share your concern, and the new property and asset manager who has just been appointed, this will be a key objective in terms of driving up this and reducing the amount of complaints.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, Councillor Hall.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I need a little bit of help from Giles in a minute. With my many conversations with Councillor Miller, I was very unaware, my fault I'm sure, that I actually are on the panel with Councillor Rowland and Councillor Miller. Giles, I think from historic, that because I'm a board member, I could not be part of the complaints procedure. I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong. Secondly, Chair, and I'm sure the 59 other elected members, I'm quite happy that I take not official complaints, but I have lots of things brought to my attention that they're resolved before they get an official complaint, and therefore I feel that the elected members certainly have their part to play in all this, and hopefully we can soften the process, so to speak, that we are able to be more of a listening ear on the code face, so that we don't get to a point that we're having too many official complaints. I mean, please tell me if I've been doing things wrong over the last 6 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. But no, I don't think you're doing things wrong. We all do it, I think.
Yeah, do you just want me to make a cut? Do you just want to come back to Councillor Hall?
Yeah, if you could, please.
Yeah, that's right. Because he's a member of the board, he cannot be he couldn't be a designated person. And DPs, I think, are actually appointed by council. It's not the responsibility of the DSOs to set that up. It's council appointments.
He is a designated person, though, Giles.
I think it was in the in the part. There was an issue in the past, wasn't there, Ian?
Yes, Giles. I mean, I to be honest, I was oblivious of it like I said, I had a conversation with Councillor Miller, and he actually reminded me, which I thought, oh yeah, that it was him, Councillor Rowland, and myself. And I thought, I can't even be on this because we went through this about 4 years ago.
We did.
Yeah.
We did. And actually, if you are the designated person at the moment, I think that's probably incorrect. And I don't know how that's happened. But I will look into that point, though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can stay with that one, then we'll move on to next. Oh, Megan. Sorry, Megan, you're on. Still there, Megan?
Yes, yeah, I am. Yeah, just to say, just going back when you mentioned Kate Symington, I mean, I'm just happy to have a word with her in my role as portfolio holder, just to start the discussion. Really, just to ask her about this new code. If you think that's appropriate, I mean, perhaps you and me, Chair, could do that between us or something, just so that we, you know, we just look into it really. But I mean, I'm not, if that's not appropriate, then I'll stand back, obviously, but I was thinking who else would do it if it wasn't me, basically.
Yeah, well, obviously I haven't got a problem with it. Unless anyone else put objection?
Yeah.
No? Okay, mate.
Yeah, okay. I'll look into that then. All right, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, no more. Oh, sorry. I've lost my contact on my thing again. Recommendations.
So the recommendation, there are 5 of them. It is recommended that the contents of the report be noted. The Housing Leadership Team reiterate the importance of outstanding customer care, considering additional training and awareness opportunities where appropriate. The Housing Operational Managers Group reviews process to ensure they are effectively coordinating responses and updates on formal complaints and councillor inquiries raised with them. The Housing Services Manager works with the Council's Information and Complaints Officer and customers on the designated tenant complaints panel to self-assess against the Ombudsman's new code by the 31st of December 2020, and better communication is needed from housing officers in responding to queries from tenants to effectively manage expectations of customers. Failure to do this causes customers to complain again, and the focus then moves to dealing with complaints rather than delivery of the service. So take them on block, and it's yes or no.
Thank you, Giles. Yes, we'll take one block. Carry on.
Okay, Chairman, we'll start with you, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain?
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy Collier, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hall, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Christine Morrison, please.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christine. And finally, Peter Sullivan, please.
Yes.
Thank you. That is carried unanimously, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next item. Item 20, status rest, Exmouth, allocation and management. And we're Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. This is an update on the 12 general purpose flats and Exmouth known as the State of Rest flats. Back in May, in response to the pandemic and rising homelessness, a senior officer decision was made to redesignate the use of the flats for temporary period. So the aim was to reduce the pressure on temporary accommodation and the homeless budget. The decision has been made to use that to move on accommodation for people who are in temporary accommodation following homeless situations. And nominations are made by the options team who manage a homeless service, and also taken to an allocations panel made up of other staff members for a decision to be made. To date, we've got 4 people into the flats and 2 others on their way with planned moves for the next couple of weeks. So we believe this process provides a greater chance of stability and sustainability for the tenants who are accommodated this way. Tenancies are standard introductory to flexible tenancies, and all flats are being furnished using repurposed MHCLG funding. So
Andrew, can I interrupt you a second? Andrew, can you hear me? We're having trouble hearing you. You're quite muffled. So I was wondering whether you could perhaps move a little bit closer to your microphone, just so we can get a bit of clarity, please. Thanks.
Is that better?
Marginally, you might have to speak a little bit louder and as clearly as you possibly can. Thank you.
Is that better?
That's marvellous, Andrew. Do continue.
Yeah, cool.
Sorry to interrupt.
Right, okay. So where was I? Yeah, so basically this policy addresses the allocation process and the management factors specific to the flats and will be reviewed in April 2021. So the recommendation is that the policy is approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chairman.
Why have I got an echo? Hello?
Andrew needs to mute himself.
Andrew, yeah. Is that better? Right. Okay. We have Councillor Hall.
Chairman, I'm quite happy to propose that we adopt this. I read the report. I don't know. I know the area because I've been down there and looked at these properties, but I just think this is common sense approach.
Yep, totally agree. If there's nobody else, we will move on to the recommendation.
I need a seconder, please, Chairman.
Okay, I'll second it.
Yeah, so the recommendation just to approve the policy then.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to the vote then, Chairman. We'll start with you, Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain?
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy Collier?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hall?
Yes.
Thank you. Christine Morrison?
Yeah.
Thank you, Christine. And finally, Peter Sullivan, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Peter. That's carried unanimously, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Right, on to two more items. We're nearly there. On to item 21, structure of the housing services. Amy.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So another piece of work impacted by COVID, but almost complete now. We've called this restructure. It's more of a reorganisation, I would suggest, of the housing service. We've not looked at the sort of setup in terms of staffing for some time. And as highlighted in our current service plan, again, we've recognised the need to do this in line with considerable changes in the sector over the last few years. So this is about making sure that we're fit for purpose in terms of what we have to achieve on from a frontline perspective. I've summarised the changes by service area. I'm not going to go through them one by one at this stage, but obviously happy to take any questions. And I have included a new structure chart, and that's on page 106. I'm going to draw members' attention to 2.3 as part of considering our housing services team, which was named our landlord services team. We've renamed that as part of this exercise as housing services. So we've recognised a growing demand in relation to mental health. We've touched on that a bit today. At previous meetings, we've talked a lot about it. And this is about tenants presenting to us with much more complex needs in those areas. So although we have increased training in this area for our frontline staff, supporting complex mental health is not part of our core service offer, as you will appreciate. This is a very specialist area. We've seen other housing providers recognising the need to have these skills in-house. And over the past few years, a number have now recruited in specialist mental health officers who work very closely with ASB teams and work specifically around tenancy sustainment, where we have residents that have these issues. The role, if we were to have it, would need to be managed very carefully. We'd need a very clear referral process internally at the risk of the officer becoming inundated from referrals across the service. So we need to sort of manage that carefully, and I'd invite the board to consider that additional resources, as I said, in terms of it sitting within the housing services team. Apologies, my toddler's just entered the room and is making quite a lot of noise in the background. Sorry, everybody. This role is not in the budget, so we would be drawing on reserves if this recommendation was to be moved. So firstly, board members, I'd invite you to debate that particular issue. Finally, in summary, still some work to do here. You will note in section 4 that we will be bringing forward some further resource issues, potentially around compliance and health and safety. I mentioned these earlier. These will possibly come to the November meeting because they're both areas where we need to really gear up in terms of health and safety issues across the stock. So that may require us to bring forward more recommendations for resources. So we do need to be very alert to that. And that is it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Councillor Hall.
Chair. Thank you, Amy. Chair, I've got a chair of mental health meeting in 3 minutes. So with this report, I absolutely welcome this approach, especially with regards to the mental health support officer. It's really refreshing to know that East Devon District Council have really got a good handle on this. I know that Councillor Miller will definitely, I'm sure, support me on this. I know that he's not part of the board. This goes hand in hand with what we've been saying about a member champion, hopefully going forward for the leadership group to consider. And one thing I would say, Chair, and like I said, I do give my apologies, is I see nothing at the moment around the switch and community development. Now, I do know that obviously this isn't practical at the moment during the pandemic. And I know there has been some online social media with Switch, etc. But I know it's something which is on the radar. I'm not saying it's for today, but we got to keep our light on this. But I would absolutely recommend that we take this additional officer. And I know the price looks pricey, but I can assure you that is the going rate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you for attending tonight, Ian.
Thank you. So my vote in my absence is a yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gizzard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this is an excellent idea. We're going to need it even more than ever now. And it looks like, once again, that East Devon is setting the scene that will happen nationally. And I think, as Councillor Hall has said, it will be money well spent, and we will get that money back by what we can offer to people. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, we haven't got no other hands in the air. So, Giles, do you want to?
Yeah, so the recommendation then is to note changes to the structure, approve the need for the recruitment of a specialist mental health support officer to work within the housing services team, to recommend additional funding is designated from the housing revenue account, and this request is made to council. Funding required £37,500, which is a grade 6 with all associated costs. Before you just take the vote, can I just check with the DSOs that we are still quorate?
We have 5 members remaining, and I understand that we need 4 to be quorate.
So, Chair, you can go to a vote.
Right, quickly before we lose any more.
Okay, we'll start with you, Chairman, please.
Yes.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes.
Thank you. Cindy Collier, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Christine Morrison, please.
Yes.
Thank you. And Peter Sullivan, please.
Yes.
Thank you. That's carried unanimously, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, quickly moving on to our final one, which is item 22, housing performance management, and it's Natalie.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make it brief. I know you all want to probably get off, so it's very simple. It's just to give you guys a bit of an insight into our housing performance management for Q1, the 2020 to 2021. The covering report also talks about the latest weekly COVID-19 report, but I think Amy covered that off in her COVID-19 housing recovery discussion with you guys, so that won't need to be discussed now. So the recommendation is just to provide you with an insight into our current performance of the housing service. So I'll be welcome to take any questions.
Okay. Doesn't look like there's anybody on. No. No, there's no questions to answer for. So recommendations.
Yeah, the recommendation is that the Housing Review Board is invited to consider and comment on the performance of the housing service. Well, there has been consideration, but there's been no comment.
No comment.
So you've fundamentally you've noted the report, but no one has made a comment.
No.
So you are presumably either approving the report.
I assume that is what it means if no one's got any questions.
This one I think this one was added late when I was on leave, so I haven't seen it. Seen the actual recommendation. So
So
I would suggest, Chairman, that you would just note the report at this stage.
Report,
as you
yes,
say,
yeah.
no one's raised any queries.
Right.
But obviously, if someone wants to raise something with future reports, that will come forward to the next meeting.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so we accept the report.
Chairman, you have a blue hand of Councillor Megan
Right.
just
Sorry,
popped up.
Megan.
Sorry, it's only. I just wanted to say something right at the end of the meeting before we finally close. So I don't know whether it's now or in a minute or two, Chair.
Well, I think we've more or less said we finished the last item, haven't we?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, Megan.
I won't keep you long, honestly. No, I just wanted to say thank you, just to record my thanks to Amy and her team, especially in the last few difficult months. We all know how hard our housing staff work, and they've gone really over and above their usual workload, and I'm sure we don't like to just thank them and record them for that. Am I on? Yeah. And also to thank the tenants for their forbearance during these difficult times, because they've had to put up with a lot of things as well and not getting repairs done and things like that. And then finally, good wishes to Jo in her new role, and we'll all be there to support her and hope we'll be fine. I'm sure we will. And very best wishes to Amy. In the next, could be the next week, who knows? During, you know, both before, during, and after her long expected happy event. So thank you to everybody. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Right, thank you, Megan. Peter.
Just to say ditto to what Megan said from the tenants. It's been an interesting 6-7 months, but I think we've got a lot more to learn, but we're doing very well at the moment.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, if nobody else, obviously I will direct everything that Megan has said. The same for me, and obviously I wish Amy good luck and all the best, and now the hard work begins.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you ever so much. That's, thank you, Megan. Thank you, Tony, Peter, and members of the board. Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else from anybody, that brings our meeting to an end. And I would like to thank everyone.
I think we all just deserve a medal for putting up with that one. Don't you? What a long meeting, but it was worth it. We've got a lot to discuss, haven't we? So yeah,
it's been a long meeting today.
Well done, everybody.
Right.
Thank you.
As I said, that brings the meeting to an end, and I would like to thank everyone, including any members of the public watching online, for taking part. However, can I remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting has no longer been recorded or going live. Until then, your comments will be live to the public. Thank you very much.